Déjà vu is a strange experience. You might be walking into a room, hearing someone speak, or seeing a street corner, and suddenly a thought flashes through your mind. I've seen this before. But you haven't. You know you haven't. Still, the feeling stays. You're aware that this moment is happening now, yet something deep inside insists that you've lived it already. That tension between what you know and what you feel is what makes déjà vu so powerful and unsettling. The term déjà vu is French. It means already seen. It describes the mental sensation where a person feels they've experienced something before, even though it's happening for the first time. The event itself can be ordinary. A word in a conversation, a song on the radio, the way the sun lights up a wall. What makes it stand out is the strong and sudden sense of familiarity that comes without warning. It might last a few seconds. It might fade before you can even describe it. But when it happens, it can feel real and convincing. One example can help make this clearer. Imagine you're sitting in a classroom. The teacher walks in and starts talking about a topic you haven't studied before. As you listen, you suddenly feel like you've heard this exact lecture before. You know it's impossible. You've never met this teacher, and you've never been in this room. Still, the feeling is so strong that it leaves you confused or even disturbed for a moment. That's déjà vu. Scientists have studied this phenomenon for decades, but there is no single explanation for why it happens. Many researchers believe it has to do with the brain's memory system. The brain stores experiences in parts called the temporal lobes. These areas help with forming and recalling memories. If something briefly activates the memory centers by mistake, it might create a false signal. This false signal tells your brain, this already happened, even though it didn't. You then experience a sense of familiarity without an actual memory to back it up. One theory says déjà vu happens when two processes in the brain get out of sync. When we experience the world, the brain processes details using both short-term and long-term memory systems. Usually, something enters short-term memory first, and then, if it's important, gets filed into long-term memory. But if there's a misfire, if the experience skips short-term memory and lands directly in long-term memory, the brain might mistake it for a past event. The result is a false memory of something happening before, even though it's brand new. Another theory focuses on how we recognize patterns. The brain is good at noticing when something looks or feels familiar. For example, if a room has the same layout or lighting as a place you've been before, your brain might pick up on that similarity. Even if the specific location is new, the parts of it might match patterns you've seen. Your brain tries to match this new scene to something in your memory and ends up creating a sense of recognition. You feel like you've seen the whole thing before, when, in fact, your brain just matched a few pieces from past experiences. Some people experience déjà vu more often than others. It tends to be more common in younger people, especially between the ages of 15 and 25. It may be because the memory systems in the brain are still developing during this time. As people age, the frequency of déjà vu usually decreases. Stress and fatigue can also make déjà vu more likely. When you're tired or mentally overworked, your brain is more prone to errors in processing memory and recognition. That's why déjà vu might happen during busy periods or after long days with little sleep. In rare cases, déjà vu can be linked to medical issues. People with a condition called temporal lobe epilepsy sometimes report strong and repeated feelings of déjà vu. These can happen right before a seizure. For these individuals, the sensation is not just a passing quirk, but a symptom tied to brain activity. Brain scans in such cases show unusual electrical patterns in the temporal lobes, the areas involved in memory. But for most people, déjà vu is not a sign of illness. It's simply an odd trick the brain plays now and then. There's also interest in how dreams might be connected to déjà vu. Some researchers believe that dreams and waking experiences can overlap in the brain. For example, if you had a dream weeks ago about a street you've never seen, and then later find yourself in a similar real-life place, your brain might retrieve the dream memory and mislabel it as a past waking experience. You then feel like you've been here before, when what you're actually recalling is a forgotten dream. Because most people don't remember their dreams clearly, they don't realize the source of the familiarity. Philosophers and writers have long been interested in déjà vu. Some people believe it hints at past lives or memories from another existence. Others think it reflects glitches in how reality is perceived. These views are not supported by scientific evidence, but they show how powerful the feeling can be. When the mind tells us something is familiar, even when we know it's not, we start to question what memory really is. Is memory just a recording of the past, or can it be created on the spot? There's also a version of déjà vu called déjà vécu, which means already lived. This is more intense. It's not just a feeling that a moment is familiar, it's a feeling that you've lived through the entire experience before. People who go through déjà vécu may even believe they can predict what's about to happen next. Some researchers suggest this version is tied to deep memory errors. In extreme cases, people with certain neurological conditions may get stuck in this state, believing that everything they encounter is a repeat. Déjà vu is not limited to one sense. While most examples are visual, it can also happen with hearing, smell, or even thoughts. You might hear a piece of music or smell a type of food and suddenly feel like it's from a moment in your past, even if you've never encountered it before. The brain treats the incoming signal as familiar, and that sense of repetition causes the strange reaction. Even though we don't fully understand it, déjà vu shows us something important about the brain. It reminds us that our sense of time and memory is not perfect. What we remember can be shaped by patterns, errors, or even brief electrical signals. Our minds are constantly interpreting the world, filling in gaps, and making guesses. Most of the time, we don't notice. But sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary moment, we get a small, eerie reminder that our brain can surprise us. The past and present blend for a heartbeat. We pause, we wonder. Then the feeling passes, and time moves on. Time can feel strange when you're driving. You might leave home, glance at the clock, and it's 3 p.m. You drive for what feels like 5 or 10 minutes, but when you arrive, it's 3:30. Other times, it's the opposite. You think you've been on the road for half an hour, but only 10 minutes have passed. This odd experience is common. It's a form of psychological time dilation, when the time you feel inside doesn't match the time shown on the clock. It can happen to anyone, especially during repetitive or familiar tasks like driving. This isn't the time dilation from physics that involves spaceships and the speed of light. That kind is real, measurable, and involves clocks ticking at different rates depending on gravity or speed. But on the road, what we're talking about is mental time dilation. It's all about how the brain tracks time based on what's happening or not happening around you. Let's say you take the same route every day. You drive from work to home. The road is familiar. You don't need to think much. Your body makes turns, slows down, speeds up, all without much effort. You might listen to music or a podcast, or your mind may drift to something else. Maybe what to cook for dinner or a conversation you had earlier. Because your brain isn't paying close attention to every part of the trip, it stores less information. When that happens, your mind ends up thinking, not much happened, so it compresses the time. That's why the drive feels shorter than it actually was. 30 minutes went by, but you only remember a few key moments. Now consider a different scenario. You're driving in a new city. The roads are unfamiliar. You need to read signs, watch your GPS, check traffic patterns, and stay alert for turns. Your brain is busy. Every second is filled with decisions. Because of that, your brain stores more detailed memories. Later, when you think back on the drive, it feels like it lasted a long time, even if it was short. The amount of memory you form affects your sense of how long the experience felt. The more memories, the longer it seems. This is one reason why childhood feels like it stretched on forever. As kids, we were constantly learning, experiencing new things, and noticing details. Time felt full. As adults, we fall into routines. Days can blur together. Time seems to pass quickly, even when the actual hours are the same. Driving is a perfect example of this. When a drive becomes routine, your brain enters something called autopilot. That doesn't mean you're asleep or not in control. It just means the task has become automatic. Your muscle memory takes over. You respond to traffic lights, other drivers, and curves in the road almost without thinking. Because of this, fewer memories are created. The brain measures time through events. If it doesn't mark many, the time feels short. On the other hand, time can stretch when something unexpected happens. You're driving and suddenly hit heavy traffic. You slow down, your attention sharpens, and you grow restless. Now you're more aware of each moment. You check the clock often. Each minute drags. That's because attention changes time perception. When you focus on time itself, it moves slower. When you ignore it, it speeds up. Stress can also distort time. Imagine you're late for an appointment. You glance at the clock again and again. Every red light feels like an hour. Your mind becomes fixated on how much time you're losing. Because you're so focused on it, each second stretches. Even if you're only delayed 5 minutes, it might feel like 20. Another example comes from long-distance road trips. In the first few hours, you might feel excited. The scenery is new, and your brain is taking in a lot of information. But after a while, especially if you're driving through a flat, empty highway, the experience becomes dull. Time may seem to slow down again because boredom stretches perception. In this case, your brain is paying attention, but not enough is happening to keep it engaged. You become more aware of time simply because there's little else to notice. Fatigue is also a factor. When you're tired, your mental clock can go off track. You might drive for a while and then realize you don't remember the last few miles. This is called highway hypnosis. You were awake, your eyes were open, and your hands were on the wheel, but your brain wasn't storing each moment clearly. Time passed, but it feels like it vanished. You feel like you skipped part of the drive. This can be dangerous because your reaction time may also slow, and you might miss signs or hazards. Some people report the opposite. They become hyper-aware of time when they're tired. Each minute feels like a struggle to stay alert. You check the dashboard clock often. You count down exits. In these moments, your mind is fixed on time, which causes it to drag. This is the same reason time moves slowly during uncomfortable moments. Waiting in line, sitting in a dentist's chair, standing in traffic. The more you want time to move faster, the slower it feels. Sensory input plays a role too. If you're driving on a road with many sights, flashing billboards, winding roads, lights and shadows shifting rapidly, your brain might absorb more. Even if the drive isn't long, the constant input creates a sense that more time passed. In contrast, a smooth, featureless road with no stops or changes might trick you into thinking you've been driving forever, even though it's been just a few minutes. The rhythm and stimulation of the road shape how you track time. The type of music you listen to while driving can also shift time perception. Fast beats and energetic songs might make the drive feel shorter. Slow music might make time feel slower. That's because music gives your brain a structure to latch onto. It becomes a tool for tracking time. If you know a song lasts 3 minutes and you've heard 5 songs, you might estimate the time based on that. But if you lose track of how many songs played, or if the music blends into the background, your estimate might drift far from reality. Driving with other people can distort time as well. If you're talking, laughing, or arguing, your attention is split between the road and the conversation. This often makes time pass quickly because your focus is elsewhere. You're creating more moments, more memory markers. But if you're alone and focused only on driving, especially in silence, time can slow down. Or if you're deep in thought, planning your day, replaying a conversation, solving a problem, you might lose track of time completely. These shifts in time perception are normal. They show that time, at least the way we feel it, is not fixed. It moves faster or slower depending on what we do, how much attention we pay, how engaged we are, and what emotions we feel. Driving just happens to be one of the most common places where this becomes clear. Because we drive so often, and because the act of driving can switch between boring, stressful, fun, and automatic, we constantly notice the oddities in how we track time behind the wheel. And even though the dashboard clock never lies, our minds often do. You lose your keys, you check the table, you lift the cushions, you check your pockets, your bag, even the floor under the couch. Nothing. You're sure you placed them by the door when you got home. You check the table again. Still nothing. After 20 minutes of searching, you give up. You sit down, frustrated. Then you glance back at the table, and there they are. The keys are sitting right in the open, exactly where you looked before. This kind of moment is common. It feels strange. You start to question yourself. Did I miss them? Did someone move them? Were they not there a minute ago? This is a basic version of what some call the disappearing and reappearing item experience. It's not a rare event. People of all ages talk about it. The item is lost, you search carefully, you find nothing, and then it shows up in a place you already checked, sometimes more than once. The feeling is confusing. It can even feel spooky or unsettling. One explanation is that we overlook things more often than we realize. Our brains don't work like cameras. They don't record every detail in a scene. They pay attention selectively. If your mind is focused on something else, if you're thinking about a phone call or a conversation from earlier, you might look straight at the keys and not actually register them. The eyes see, but the brain doesn't process. This happens especially when we're rushed or distracted. Later, when we notice the keys in plain sight, it feels like they've suddenly appeared. But really, they were always there. We just didn't notice. This is called inattentional blindness. It's a well-studied effect in psychology. It happens when we fail to notice something because our attention is elsewhere. There's a famous experiment where people are asked to count how many times a basketball is passed between players. In the middle of the video, a person in a gorilla suit walks through the scene. Many viewers don't notice the gorilla at all. Their attention is locked on the ball. The gorilla is right there, but the brain ignores it. The same thing can happen when searching for an object. If your focus is on the search rather than the specific item, you might miss it even if it's right in front of you. Another explanation involves memory. When we search for something, we often rely on a mental map of the space. We think, I already checked that spot, and we believe it's true. But we might not have checked it as well as we thought. Maybe we glanced at the table but didn't move the papers. Maybe we looked in the drawer, but only at the top layer. Our memory fills in the rest. We become convinced we checked more thoroughly than we did. So when the item shows up later, it feels like it moved, even if it never did. There's also the problem of assumption. When we lose something, we often assume we know where it should be. We expect the wallet to be on the dresser or the pen to be in the drawer. If it's not in that expected place, we may ignore what doesn't match our mental picture. If the keys are partly covered by a magazine, we may not see them. If the item is at a different angle or in unusual lighting, we may overlook it. This is called confirmation bias. We tend to look for things in the way we expect to find them. When reality doesn't match our expectation, we often miss it. Stress can make this worse. When we're anxious, we become less careful. We search faster, we skip steps, we open a drawer, glance inside, and close it, believing we searched it. But the glance wasn't enough. Stress affects working memory too. That's the short-term memory we use to keep track of what we're doing. When it's overloaded, we forget which spots we've already searched. We might check the same place twice and still miss the item. The search becomes messy. When the item shows up later, we feel confused. But it's often a result of how poorly we searched, not any mystery. Another reason could be interference from other objects. Sometimes, the missing item is surrounded by things that blend with it. A black phone on a dark couch, a white remote on a pile of papers. This is called visual camouflage. The item is technically visible, but it doesn't stand out. Our brain processes the whole scene, not every detail. So if the object blends into its surroundings, our eyes can skip over it again and again. When we finally spot it, the moment feels strange, like the object appeared out of thin air. In some cases, though, people report events that are harder to explain. They insist the spot was empty. They checked it twice. They even ask someone else to check. Then the item shows up clearly, not hidden, not camouflaged, just sitting there. These stories lead some people to believe that something unusual is happening. They talk about glitches in reality or shifts in perception. There's no scientific proof for these ideas, but the strong emotional reaction they create shows how powerful and personal the experience can be. There's also a social factor. If someone else is present and they find the item you missed, it feels worse. You might wonder how they spotted it when you couldn't. This can make you question your memory or even your sanity. But it's common. Different people focus on different things. One person might look slowly and spot small details. Another might move too quickly and miss obvious ones. When one person finds the item, it doesn't mean the other was careless. It just shows how different our attention and perception can be. People sometimes say the item wanted to stay hidden or didn't want to be found. These are playful ways of making sense of the odd feeling. Of course, objects don't move on their own or make choices, but describing it this way helps express the experience. When you're sure you checked a spot and the item shows up there later, it creates a mystery in your mind. The brain doesn't like gaps or contradictions, so it tries to explain them, even if the explanation is a joke. In daily life, this kind of event is more common than most people admit. It happens with keys, wallets, phones, glasses, remotes, pens, and other small items. It usually happens during busy routines, when you're getting ready for work, packing for a trip, or cleaning the house. These are times when attention is split, memory is weak, and the chances of missing something are high. It doesn't mean anything is wrong. It just means your brain is doing what it always does, filling in gaps, ignoring distractions, and making educated guesses. Next time it happens, you may feel the same wave of confusion. You'll ask yourself, how did I miss that? You might retrace your steps, even question reality for a moment. That's normal. It shows how the mind works behind the scenes. Even when we think we're paying attention, we're only seeing parts of the world. The rest is being processed, filtered, and sometimes overlooked. And once in a while, the result is a small, harmless mystery. You're standing in line at a coffee shop. A couple in front of you is talking. You're not really listening, just zoning out, waiting for your turn. Then one of them says something that snaps you into focus. It's specific. Something like, "And then he forgot the blue notebook again, just like last time." Your stomach drops a little. You forgot your own blue notebook this morning. No one else knows that. You didn't tell anyone. But now a stranger is talking about a blue notebook, and for a second, it feels like they're talking about you. This kind of moment is sometimes called an NPC conversation. The term comes from video games. NPC stands for non-player character. These are the characters in a game who aren't controlled by players. They follow scripts, they walk down streets, repeat lines, and behave as if they live in the world, but they're not real. They don't know you're there. They just act as background. In some games, you might overhear NPCs say things that seem oddly fitting. You walk past and one says, "He won't be back this time," right after you fail a quest. It adds atmosphere, but it also creates a weird feeling, like the world is aware of you when it shouldn't be. In real life, moments like this feel just as strange. You're not in a game, but you overhear someone say something that lines up exactly with your life. Maybe a man on the bus says, "She'll never find the envelope if she keeps looking in the wrong place." And you're currently searching your apartment for a missing envelope. Or someone at a table near yours says, "It's always the third week of May, I swear." And you're sitting there thinking about an appointment scheduled for the third week of May. These moments aren't just coincidence. They feel personal, almost scripted. What makes them stick in your mind is the precision. It's not just that the conversation is vaguely related to your situation. It's that it seems to target something you're actively thinking about. You weren't part of the conversation. No one knows your thoughts, but now you're overhearing them spoken aloud, word for word. It feels impossible. It pulls you out of the moment. You may look around, half expecting someone to laugh or explain, but no one does. The people keep talking, unaware of the effect their words just had. This isn't about psychic ability or hidden cameras. It's about the way the brain processes information. Every day, we hear dozens of conversations. Most of them don't register. They pass by in the background. But if one lines up with something we're thinking about, it grabs our attention. This is called selective attention. It's the same thing that happens when you buy a new car and suddenly start seeing the same model everywhere. The cars were always there. You just never noticed them before. Now your brain is tuned in. Your mind is always looking for patterns. It's how humans make sense of the world. When something matches what we're thinking or feeling, the brain sees it as meaningful. That's why overheard conversations can seem so pointed. They hit a nerve that's already active. The odds of someone saying something like, "He still hasn't apologized for missing dinner," are not low. But if you're waiting for an apology from a friend, those words strike you in a different way. You don't remember all the random things people said that didn't relate to your life. You remember the one that did. Sometimes it's the phrasing that makes it feel uncanny. You're worrying about a decision, and a stranger says, "Well, you can't turn back now." The sentence is general. It could apply to a lot of things, but because it echoes your exact thoughts, it feels loaded. It feels like advice. It feels like the universe is talking to you through the mouths of strangers. Other times it's the context. Maybe you're thinking of quitting your job. You haven't told anyone. You're walking past a group of people, and one of them says, "Honestly, it's just not worth it anymore. Time to move on." You freeze. That's your inner dialogue spoken by a stranger. It feels too close. The timing feels staged. But again, your brain is doing what it always does, filtering noise and finding meaning. The human brain is very sensitive to timing. If you're deep in thought and someone nearby says something that connects, the moment locks in. It's not that the conversation was about you. It's that your mind linked it to your current situation. Because of this, some people describe the feeling as waking up inside a simulation. It's like the world is reacting to you, even when you're passive. You feel watched. You feel known. The moment cuts through your routine and creates a tiny pocket of uncertainty. For some people, these moments bring comfort. It feels like the world is aligned with their thoughts. It's a reminder that they're not alone in their feelings. For others, it's unsettling. It raises questions. Why did they say that? How did they know? Of course, logically, we know they didn't, but emotionally, the connection feels real. It bypasses logic and creates a short-lived sense of unreality. In rare cases, people report hearing not just similar phrases but exact ones, words they've only thought, not said aloud. This gets into strange territory. Maybe you're thinking, "I should have taken the earlier train," and someone behind you says the same thing, word for word. It can feel intrusive. It makes you check your surroundings, wonder if you're being recorded or if someone's reading your mind. Most likely it's a coincidence. Language is shared. Situations are shared. People use the same expressions, but the timing still shocks you. Another factor is emotional state. When you're anxious or sad, your brain becomes hyper-aware. You notice small things more. You listen more closely. Your thoughts feel more intense, so anything that reflects them feels louder. If you're in a calm state, the same sentence might pass unnoticed. But if you're on edge, it lands hard. Your mental state primes you to hear messages in the noise. Sometimes, people turn these moments into signs. A person is unsure about a decision. They hear someone say, "Go for it, you've waited long enough," and they take it as a signal. The conversation wasn't directed at them, but it felt like it was. It gave them a push. This is a kind of informal divination, using chance moments in the environment to guide choices. It's not logical, but it can be powerful. The sense of connection gives confidence. Overheard conversations that strike a nerve also highlight how many lives are running in parallel. Your worry is someone else's too. Your situation isn't unique. This can be humbling or reassuring. It reminds us that we're not alone in our thoughts. That stranger on the bench might be dealing with the same thing you are. When their words echo your own private fears or hopes, the world feels smaller. It feels shared. The NPC conversation effect also plays into how we view control. Most of life is outside our influence. We pass by hundreds of people, hear fragments of talk, and move on. But when one of those fragments hooks into our own story, it feels like we've caught a glitch. It's a break in the randomness, a brief moment where it feels like the script and the player met in the middle. And even if we know it's just coincidence, the moment stays with us. You're walking through a shopping mall. You glance up and see someone across the hall. Your chest tightens. It's your cousin. Same hair, same walk. Even the way they tilt their head, it's exact. You're about to wave when the person turns and your stomach sinks. That's not your cousin. It's a stranger. They look exactly like them, down to their smile. But the moment you make eye contact, you realize it's someone you've never met. You turn away, confused. That moment stays with you for days. You keep thinking, how could someone look so much like them and not be them? This experience is called encountering a look-alike or an identical stranger. It feels strange and personal. You know what your friend or family member looks like. You've spent hours with them, You recognize their face instantly without thinking. So when you see someone who matches that face almost perfectly, your brain reacts. At first, you don't question it. You assume it's the person you know. Only when you get closer or get a better look does the illusion break. Faces are important. From the moment we're born, we're wired to recognize them. The brain has areas that are dedicated to identifying faces and picking up on tiny details: how wide the eyes are, how the mouth moves, how the skin folds around the nose. This system is incredibly good at telling people apart. You can recognize someone from behind by their walk or posture, even in poor lighting. But this system can also be fooled. The brain doesn't store full, high-resolution images of faces. It works more like a set of shortcuts. It picks up on key features: the shape of the jaw, the way someone's eyebrows sit, the slope of the nose. When two people share several of these features, the brain may assume they're the same person, especially if the situation makes sense, like seeing someone where you expect to see them. If you're near your friend's workplace or in their neighborhood, your brain is more likely to say, "That's them." When it turns out to be a stranger, the correction feels jarring. There's also something called the configural processing of faces. This is how we look at the overall layout of a face instead of analyzing each feature separately. It's fast and efficient, but it also means we can be tricked when someone shares the same overall layout. It's like recognizing a song from just a few notes. If another song starts with the same notes, you might think it's the first song until more details come in. Lookalike experiences work the same way. Your brain hears the first few notes and jumps to a conclusion. Some people see more lookalikes than others. If you have a strong visual memory, you may be more likely to spot someone who looks like someone you know. If you spend a lot of time observing people, at work, in school, on public transport, you may store more facial patterns. That means the chances of a false match go up. You might be in a new city and see someone who looks like your high school teacher from 10 years ago. Even though it's clearly not possible, your brain still draws the connection. These encounters can also stir up emotional confusion. If the person you see looks like someone you love or someone you've lost, the moment can feel more intense. For example, someone might see a stranger who looks like their late grandfather. They do a double take. The clothes are different. The posture is off, but the face, there's something about the face that pulls them in. Even if they know it can't be real, the feeling is hard to shake. The brain stores emotional memories alongside visual ones. So when a face matches, even partly, the emotion comes back too. In some cases, people go further. They try to talk to the stranger. They say, "You look just like my brother," or "Has anyone ever told you you look like?" This opens up a curious space. The stranger may laugh and say, "Yeah, I get that all the time." Or they may look puzzled. Some strangers lean into the mystery and ask questions about their supposed twin. Others don't react at all. These moments are brief, but they leave an impression. You start to wonder how many people out there might resemble someone you know. How many identical strangers have you passed without noticing? There's also the possibility of doppelgängers. The term comes from German and means double walker. It's used to describe someone who looks exactly like someone else, often with eerie accuracy. In stories and myths, doppelgängers are sometimes linked to bad luck or strange events. But in real life, they're just people with matching features. Still, when someone has the same face, same haircut, same body language, it can feel like you've stepped into a glitch. Researchers have looked into how common lookalikes really are. A study in 2022 used facial analysis software to compare thousands of people and found that many unrelated people shared a high degree of facial similarity. These people were not related, but their faces had enough points in common that algorithms and humans would easily confuse them. Genetics plays a role here. There are only so many ways a human face can be arranged. Some combinations are more common than others. As the global population grows, the chances of finding someone with a nearly identical face go up. Cultural exposure can also affect how we perceive lookalikes. If you grow up in a place where most people look similar to you, you become better at spotting subtle differences within that group. But you might struggle more to tell people apart from unfamiliar groups. This is called the other race effect. and it's well documented. It doesn't mean people are bad at recognizing faces. It just shows how experience shapes perception. It also explains why someone from another culture might say, "You look just like my cousin," even when you see no resemblance at all. Digital life adds another layer. Sometimes you'll scroll through photos online and stop cold. A person in a random image looks just like your friend. You check the name, it's someone else. But the resemblance is strong enough to feel strange. You might even save the photo or send it to your friend just to say, "This is your twin." Social media, with its endless faces and constant exposure, increases the odds of these moments. The more faces you see, the more likely you are to find a match. Even celebrities aren't immune. There are famous examples of people who look like others in the spotlight: actors, musicians, even historical figures. Fans often post side-by-side comparisons. The results can be so close that they spark rumors about time travel or secret siblings. But again, it comes down to facial structure and coincidence. In a world of billions of faces, repeats are bound to happen. In day-to-day life, seeing someone who looks like a person you know brings you to a pause. It stops your thoughts. It forces you to look again, to question your eyes. These moments are not just visual. They reach into memory, identity, and even emotion. Your brain scrambles to make sense of it. Is that really them? Could it be? Why would they be here? When you find out it's a stranger, there's a ripple of disorientation. The mind catches up, but the feeling lingers. And later, you might still tell someone, "You won't believe this. I saw your double today." You're walking through a park, the wind is moving the trees, people are jogging, a dog runs past, and there's laughter from a group near the fountain. Then your eyes land on one person. They're standing completely still. No movement, no blinking. Their hands are by their side. They're not on their phone. They're not talking. They're not looking around. They're just frozen. You glance away, then back. Still no movement. For a second, it looks like someone hit pause on them while the rest of the world keeps going. This isn't a statue. This isn't someone posing for a photo. It's a real person, dressed normally, standing in a natural spot, but doing absolutely nothing. The moment feels odd because it breaks your expectations. People are rarely still. Even when we're resting, we shift our weight, blink, check our phone, scratch our nose, or glance around. So when you see someone not doing any of that, your brain notices. It's not that it's wrong. It just doesn't match what your brain predicts should happen. Our minds constantly scan for motion. We use it to tell what's alive, what's nearby, what's a threat, and what's normal. That's why you can spot someone moving in your peripheral vision, even when you're focused on something else. Your brain expects humans to be in motion, even if it's subtle. A still human figure grabs your attention, not because of what it's doing, but because of what it's not doing. Think of a street corner. People waiting for the light are usually fidgeting. They shift their bags, stretch their necks, or step forward slightly. Now imagine one person in the crowd who doesn't move at all. They don't blink, they don't look up, they don't check the time. They just stand, frozen. You would notice them. You might stare, you might even feel uncomfortable. Sometimes this happens for harmless reasons. Maybe the person is deep in thought. Maybe they're listening to music or meditating. Some people stand still when they're overwhelmed. Others are simply resting. But when their stillness lasts beyond a few seconds, something shifts. People around them seem real and alive. But the frozen person begins to feel unreal, like a mannequin or a glitch in a video game. You might see this in a mall. You're walking and notice someone standing in the middle of a corridor, not facing a store, not walking, not talking, just still, no expression. Your brain runs through possibilities. Are they lost? Are they waiting for someone? Are they okay? You look again, but nothing changes. The stillness holds. It's like seeing a frame of film stuck in a loop while the rest of the reel plays on. This moment can trigger unease, even though nothing dangerous is happening. It's the break in rhythm that causes it. Life is full of small movements, chatter, footsteps, machines humming. The absence of movement where there should be some catches the eye, like a sudden silence in a conversation. It pulls focus. You become hyper-aware of your surroundings. You might start watching others more closely. You might even check yourself. Am I the only one noticing this? Some people call these moments glitches in the matrix. That's just a nickname. It doesn't mean they believe in simulations. It's a way to describe how unnatural the moment feels. Like watching a video and one character freezes while the others keep moving. You know the frozen person is real. You know there's probably a normal explanation, but your first reaction is confusion. Then curiosity. Then a lingering sense of something being off. There are more practical reasons someone might freeze. Anxiety can cause a person to lock up physically. In moments of high stress or panic, the body sometimes enters a freeze response. It's part of the fight, flight, freeze system. You might think someone who's anxious would pace or fidget, but some shut down completely. They stand motionless. They stare ahead. They seem disconnected. If you see someone frozen like this, they may not be aware of how still they've become. There's also dissociation. This is when a person's mind disconnects from their surroundings. It can happen during emotional distress. The person might appear frozen, blank, or detached. Their body is present, but their awareness is elsewhere. To a passerby, they just look like someone standing oddly still. To them, time might feel slowed down or absent entirely. But most frozen moments are simpler. People space out. They stop to think. They become absorbed in their own mind. They're still, not because something's wrong, but because they're unaware of how still they are. They're not watching a clock or checking how long they've been motionless. You, as the observer, are the one keeping track. You're the one noticing. That's what makes it strange. It's not a moment that includes you, it's one you witness from the outside. Some people are drawn to these moments. They photograph them, they write about them, they treat them like rare occurrences, even though they probably happen more often than we think. What makes them feel rare is how they stand out from background noise. They contrast with the buzz of ordinary life. They look staged, even though they're not. Like someone hit pause on just one figure in the middle of a moving world. There's also a difference between short stillness and extended stillness. A person who stands still for 5 seconds is forgettable. 10 seconds, and you start to notice. 30 seconds, and you begin to wonder. 2 minutes or more, and your brain sounds an alert. This isn't how people normally behave. Even if there's nothing threatening about it, the moment now feels charged. You wait to see what they'll do. You might even feel tempted to break the silence. Ask them if they're okay or what they're doing. Frozen people show up in all kinds of places, at train stations, on sidewalks, in waiting rooms, on stairwells. Sometimes they're facing walls. Sometimes they stare at the ground. Sometimes they stand in the middle of open spaces with no clear purpose. These scenes stay in your mind because they don't follow the script. The brain is always looking for patterns, and when one breaks, it stops and pays attention. You might pass someone who's frozen and keep walking, but you think about them later. The way they held themselves, the fact that they didn't move at all. The longer they stayed still, the more unreal they seemed. It's not fear you remember, it's the strangeness. The stillness of a single person in a moving world. A frame of quiet in the middle of noise. A pause where there shouldn't be one. And maybe even after they started moving again, that moment of silence remains. You check the time and see 11:11. A few hours later, you look again and it's 2:22. You buy lunch and the total comes to $5.55. You scroll through social media and someone has exactly 3,333 likes. Over the next few days, it keeps happening. Every time you glance at the clock, the digits match: 4:44, 12:12, 10:10. At first, you brush it off, but after a while, it starts to feel strange. You're not trying to find these numbers, you're just noticing them everywhere. It's not just once or twice, it's enough that it grabs your attention. This pattern is often called repeating numbers. People notice them on clocks, phone screens, receipts, license plates, ticket numbers, and even house addresses. They're sometimes called mirror numbers or angel numbers. Some see them as signs, others just find them odd. But either way, when you keep seeing the same number combinations again and again, it can feel like something is trying to get your attention. Most people notice repeating numbers by accident. You're going about your day and the time reads 1:11. You don't plan to look at the clock at that moment. You just do. Then it happens again the next day. Then again later in the week. It's not only clocks. Maybe you order something online and your confirmation code ends in 111. Maybe the grocery bill comes out to 33.33. You start to wonder if it's just coincidence. The truth is, the brain is built to find patterns. It's how we make sense of the world. We scan for repetition and structure. When we notice something that stands out, our brain remembers it. But it doesn't always remember what we don't notice. If you check the time at 3:19 or 7:42, it doesn't feel special. Your brain skips over it. But if the numbers match, like 3:33 or 4:44, it creates a small spark. It feels cleaner, simpler, easy to remember, and that makes it stick. This is part of a cognitive bias called apophenia. It's when the brain sees connections or patterns that aren't necessarily there. It's not a flaw, it's how humans process noise. We look for meaning in randomness. It's the same process that lets us recognize faces in clouds or hear our name in a noisy room. When numbers line up, our brain flags it. It doesn't matter that the same numbers appeared 100 times without matching. The one time they do match becomes the moment we remember. Take the number 1111. It's one of the most commonly noticed repeating times. People say they always catch the clock at that exact minute. But think about how often you check your phone or glance at a clock. It might be 30 or 40 times a day. Over a week, that adds up. If one or two of those checks happen to fall on 11:11, it stands out. Over time, the brain starts to expect it. You may even look at the clock more often around that time without realizing it. This creates a feedback loop. You see 11:11 more often because you're unconsciously checking the time around then. And each time you do, it strengthens the feeling that it's happening for a reason. Some people believe repeating numbers have meaning. They might see 11:11 as a sign to make a wish or to reflect on their life. Others attach personal meaning to different numbers. If your birthday is March 3rd, seeing 333 might feel special to you. If you've lost someone and their favorite number was 7, seeing 707 or 77 might feel like a message. These meanings aren't built into the numbers. They come from you. The brain tags them as important based on personal memory and emotion. When something emotional gets tied to a number, your mind begins to look for it more often. Receipts and totals often reinforce this. You're paying for coffee and the total is $4.44. You don't think much of it until you also see a car with 444 on the license plate later that day. The numbers seem to chase you, but it's not that they appear more often, it's that you notice them more. This is called the frequency illusion. Once something enters your awareness, you see it everywhere. It's the same reason someone who buys a red car suddenly sees red cars on every street. They were always there. You just weren't paying attention. In some cases, repeating numbers show up in ways that genuinely surprise people. You're writing down a phone number and realize the last 4 digits are 12112. You're looking at a building floor plan and the room you're assigned is 404. The coincidence feels too neat. Even if you tell yourself it doesn't mean anything, the moment lingers. It feels loaded, like a small interruption in the randomness of the world. Part of this is because numbers are everywhere. They run through time, money, addresses, technology, and schedules. With so many numbers surrounding us, repetition is bound to happen. But most of those repetitions don't register. It's only the ones that stand out because of pattern, symmetry, or emotional link that stick. Sometimes the feeling that repeating numbers matter is comforting. Life can feel chaotic. We don't always know what's coming. When numbers line up, it gives a moment of order, a pattern, a structure. Something we can grasp, that can feel grounding. Even if we don't believe the numbers have a message, we may still pause and think about where we are in life. That alone makes the moment feel meaningful. Others take it further. They assign specific meanings to numbers. They say 111 is a reminder to stay focused, that 222 signals balance, that 333 means you're on the right path. These ideas often come from spiritual or numerological traditions. Whether or not you believe in those meanings, the act of seeing the number and stopping to reflect adds weight to the moment. You're not just glancing at the clock, you're thinking about your direction, your goals, your mindset. Even skeptics admit that repeating numbers can feel strange. It's hard to explain the emotional reaction they spark. You know the numbers aren't talking to you. You know it's just chance. But it still gives you a pause. like seeing your reflection in a mirror where you didn't expect one. For a split second, it feels like the world is winking at you. The experience is personal. Two people can walk through the same store, see the same receipt, and only one will notice that the total was $11.11. The other won't care. The difference is in how we assign meaning and how tuned in we are to patterns. If your brain is used to looking for symmetry, or if you're going through a time of uncertainty, you may find comfort in noticing patterns. They give you something regular to hold on to. You don't have to believe in signs to be affected by patterns. The brain likes repetition. It finds comfort in rhythm and structure. That's why we enjoy music, why poetry has rhythm, why rituals bring peace. Repeating numbers are like tiny rituals scattered across the day. They show up without effort. They ask for nothing, but they offer a chance to pause, reflect, and wonder. And whether that moment means something cosmic or just neurological, it still shapes how you feel. It still marks time in a way that feels different. It turns an ordinary glance at the clock into something you remember. You're walking down the street, cars pass, people talk, a dog barks from behind a fence, a bike whirs by, the world hums with motion and sound. Then without warning, everything goes quiet. No engines, no footsteps, no voices. Even the wind seems to stop. The silence hits you all at once. Your ears strain. You expect something, anything, to break it, but nothing does. It's not just quiet. It's as if someone pressed mute on the entire world. This kind of moment happens more often than people admit. One second, the world is full of normal noise, and the next, it drops into a strange, hollow stillness. It can happen indoors or outdoors, in crowded places or empty ones. The effect is always the same. You freeze, you listen. Your body tenses slightly, your mind goes alert. Something feels off, but you can't explain why. Everything looks normal, but the silence changes how it feels. Your ears are always active. Even when you sleep, they keep listening. The brain filters out most background noise, so you're not overwhelmed, but it still registers that sound is there. You don't notice the air conditioning until it stops. You don't notice the fridge hum until it cuts out. That sudden drop in sound breaks your focus. It creates a gap. That's why silence stands out. It's not just absence, it's a shift. In nature, animals use silence as a signal. Birds stop singing when a predator is nearby. Insects go quiet when the air pressure changes before a storm. Forests fall still when something unfamiliar enters. This kind of silence isn't random, it's a warning. Humans evolved in these same environments. When everything around us goes silent, our brain still reacts the way it did thousands of years ago. We get alert. We stop what we're doing. We scan for danger. That reaction is part of the fight or flight system. Our nervous system picks up on small changes. A sudden lack of sound sends a message. Pay attention. It triggers the brain's threat detection circuits. You might not feel fear right away, but you'll feel something. A shift in your stomach, a tightness in your chest, a sense that you've just stepped out of sync with the world around you. Think of a classroom before the bell rings. Students chat, chairs scrape, papers shuffle. Then the teacher walks in and the room goes silent. Everyone stops. The silence itself becomes a signal. It marks the start of something new. It demands focus. That's a social silence. It's expected. But sometimes silence isn't expected. You're walking through a mall and suddenly realize no music is playing. No voices echo off the walls. The fountains are off. The silence hits harder because it's out of place. Another example happens during snowfall. Snow absorbs sound. When it falls thick and fast, it creates a blanket of silence. Footsteps become softer. Tires roll without much noise. Even breathing sounds clearer. You walk down a snow-covered street and feel like the whole world has gone quiet. That kind of silence is peaceful, not eerie. It's soft. It doesn't feel like something's wrong. But the mechanism is similar. Layers of sound have been removed. Now think about the silence after a power cut. The lights blink off. The hum of appliances stops. Fans stop spinning. The buzz of electricity fades. That kind of silence feels unnatural because it's sudden and complete. We're used to low-level noise in the background. Computers, machines, screens. When they stop, we're left with raw silence. It doesn't just sound empty. It sounds unfinished, like something's missing. There's also the silence that follows a loud sound. You hear a loud crash, then nothing. That pause makes the silence sharper. The contrast between noise and stillness makes you more aware of both. In action movies, directors use this effect. An explosion rings out, then silence takes over. It heightens tension. It focuses the viewer's attention. Real life works the same way. A loud clap of thunder, then silence. A shout in the distance, then nothing. The silence becomes more than just quiet. It becomes a character in the scene. Some people experience sudden silence during moments of deep focus. You're writing, drawing, or reading, and suddenly realize the world around you is silent. Not because everything stopped, but because your brain stopped tracking the noise. This is called auditory fade. Your ears still work, but your mind tunes out everything except the task. When you come out of that focus, the return of sound can be jarring. There are also moments where silence feels almost staged. You walk into a room and everyone goes quiet. You wonder what they were talking about. You sense tension. The silence becomes thick. It holds meaning even though nothing is being said. Or you walk into a museum or church and the silence feels sacred. It creates space for thought. In these moments, silence isn't a lack, it's presence. It fills the room like sound normally would. The most uncanny moments of sudden silence are the ones that feel unexplainable. You're outside, and every dog, every bird, every voice stops at once. No cars pass, no planes fly overhead, the wind dies. You stand still, waiting for the next sound, and it doesn't come. These moments can last 5 seconds or half a minute. They feel longer because they're quiet. Your brain stretches time in silence. With nothing to measure against, every second feels heavy. One theory says that sudden silence is easier to notice than sudden sound. Our brains track patterns. When noise is constant and then cuts off, the break is easier to detect than when silence is broken by sound. That's why we often notice when things stop, but not when they start. We only realize the fridge was running when it turns off. We notice the fan when it stops spinning. The shift is what triggers awareness. Some people describe these moments as feeling like the world glitched. Everything was fine, then it wasn't. The moment felt unreal, like the air itself changed. There's no clear reason for the silence, nothing you can point to. It doesn't match what you expect from the space around you. This mismatch creates dissonance. Your senses tell you something's off, but your mind can't explain what or why. You may check your surroundings. You may strain your ears. You may even look at your phone to confirm time is still moving. The moment passes. Sound returns. Birds, a car, a voice, the rustle of wind. Everything feels normal again. But the silence stays in your memory. It marks a break in the usual flow of things. It doesn't need a reason to feel important. The stillness speaks on its own. Sometimes silence happens in groups. You're in a cafe, people chatting, cups clinking, and then all at once the room goes quiet. No one planned it. No one announced it. It just happened. Some call this a synchronous silence. It's rare. It feels coordinated even though it isn't. It makes people laugh awkwardly or look around. No one knows what caused it. It breaks the rhythm. And like all moments of sudden silence, it reminds you that sound isn't just background, it's structure. When it disappears, even briefly, the world feels unfinished. You open a cupboard, reach for a mug, and knock over a spoon instead. It falls, but it doesn't fall right. It flips slowly through the air, almost floating. For a brief second, it doesn't seem to obey gravity. Then it hits the... You open a cupboard, reach for a mug, and knock over a spoon instead. It falls, but it doesn't fall right. It flips slowly through the air, almost floating. For a brief second, it doesn't seem to obey gravity. Then it hits the floor, bounces off the tile, spins upward, and lands on the counter behind you. You stand there, confused. You didn't throw it. You dropped it. It should have fallen straight down, but it didn't. That moment sticks with you, not because the spoon broke or made noise, but because it didn't act the way you expected. This kind of event feels like a physics failure. You see something fall, but instead of dropping in a straight line and landing where logic says it should, it moves unpredictably. Maybe it floats for an extra second. Maybe it spins too smoothly. Maybe it bounces 5 feet in the air even though it barely touched the ground. It doesn't look wrong in the sense that something is broken. It just looks off. Your brain knows how objects are supposed to move. When they don't follow that script, it feels like reality glitched for a second. You drop a pencil, it hits the floor, rolls in a straight line, and then makes a sharp turn and slides under the fridge. You check the floor. It's flat, no slope, no reason for the sudden turn. You try to recreate it. You drop the pencil again. This time it just stops. The original path makes no sense. It's not a major event, but it leaves you with a weird feeling. The laws of motion didn't break, but they bent in a way you didn't expect. Another common version happens with balls. You bounce a rubber ball off a wall. It hits, then shoots off in a strange direction. Or you throw it down, expecting a single bounce, and it hits the ground and comes straight back to your hand. It feels too perfect, too symmetrical. Like the kind of bounce you'd see in a video game with clean geometry and no air resistance. It feels staged, even though you're the one who threw it. Sometimes the object doesn't fall strangely. The fall itself feels strange. You drop something from your hand, and it seems to hang in the air a split second too long. It's not slow motion, not really, but it feels delayed, like a skipped frame or a lag in a video. Your brain expects the object to fall fast and land with a thud, but this time it floats just a little. The descent is smooth, too smooth. That moment, even if it's half a second long, stretches in your perception. This might happen because your brain is over-processing. When you're paying close attention, time feels slower. You notice more detail. You track the object with your eyes. That level of focus makes the moment feel stretched. Your senses are working harder, so your perception of time shifts. What really took 1 second feels like 2. This can happen in moments of stress or surprise, but also during minor accidents. Your brain briefly goes into alert mode. Everything sharpens. Time bends, not in reality, but in your head. Other times, the object hits something that changes its path in a subtle way. You drop a coin and expect it to fall straight, but it clips your belt or a chair leg and changes angle. That one touch shifts its whole trajectory. But you don't always see the point of contact. You just see the result, a strange fall, an odd bounce. To you, it looks like the coin moved on its own. You might drop your phone and watch it land face down, slide for 3 feet, and then flip over by itself just before stopping. You stand there, staring. You weren't touching it. The flip doesn't seem to come from momentum. It looks like the phone made a choice. Of course it didn't. But the smoothness, the precision, makes the motion look intentional. Your brain struggles to connect it to what you know about falling objects. Another version of this happens when something lands too softly. You drop a small box, expecting a sharp hit. Instead, it lands silently. No bounce, no impact sound. It just rests there. It feels like gravity forgot to finish the job. Even if nothing went wrong, the lack of feedback, the sound, the bounce, the vibration, makes the fall feel incomplete. It feels like you missed a frame in reality. Some people experience the opposite. An object falls, hits something soft, but makes a sound that's too loud. You drop a pair of socks and they land with a thud. That doesn't make sense. Socks shouldn't make a sound like that. You look around. Maybe something else fell at the same time. Maybe the sound echoed, but you don't see anything else. That mismatch, soft object, loud sound, creates a tiny crack in your trust in the world around you. You drop a fork and watch it hit the floor, bounce, and land perfectly upright, standing on its prongs. It doesn't fall over. It just stands there like a magician's trick. You stare, then laugh, then take a photo. It's funny, sure. But it also feels uncanny. The probability was so low, the motion so exact, it feels like it shouldn't have happened. You know it's physics, you know it's just angles and momentum, but the result makes you question the process. Moments like this highlight how much we rely on mental shortcuts. You expect gravity to act a certain way. You expect objects to fall in straight lines, bounce with a certain amount of energy, slide in predictable directions. These expectations come from experience. You've dropped hundreds of things. You've seen thousands of falls. When something violates that pattern, it stands out, not because it's impossible, but because it's unfamiliar. In games or animated films, physics are often exaggerated. Characters jump and hang in the air. Objects fall in arcs that don't match real-world motion. When we see something like that in real life, a floaty fall, a too-perfect bounce, it feels like fiction invaded reality. It's not that physics broke, it's that the event matched a version of reality we've only seen in simulations. One more example. You pour water into a cup and a single drop jumps out, sideways. It lands on the counter even though your hand was steady. You try again. Nothing happens. But the first drop defied the expected path. It didn't flow. It launched. There's a physical explanation. Surface tension, sudden airflow, but the moment doesn't feel mechanical. It feels like the drop had its own will. These events don't need to be big. You're stacking books and one tilts but doesn't fall. It hovers on the edge for 5 seconds, then slides off. It's a slow, strange fall. You watch it from start to finish. You don't move to catch it. You just observe. When it lands, you're not worried about the damage. You're thinking about how odd the fall looked. These tiny physics failures are reminders that our sense of the world is built on patterns. When something doesn't follow the expected pattern, it pulls us out of autopilot. It gives us a second of pause, a moment of questioning. You're walking home at night. It's quiet. A breeze moves through the trees. Your footsteps echo. Then you pass under a streetlight, and just as you step beneath it, it flickers. It goes dim for a moment, then returns to full brightness. You keep walking. Another night, same route, same time. You pass the same streetlight. It flickers again, just once. Just when you're directly under it. After a few more nights, the pattern continues. Other people walk by, nothing happens. A dog passes under, no change. A car goes by, no flicker. But when you approach, the light glitches. You start to notice. You start to expect it. And then even when you try not to, it still happens. This experience isn't dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't stop the world. But it stays in your mind. It doesn't feel like coincidence anymore. It feels personal, like the light is reacting to you. You don't believe that. Logically, you know streetlights don't respond to individuals. But something about the timing makes it hard to shake the feeling. The flicker becomes a silent interaction, a nod from the environment, a signal that only happens when you're around. These events are surprisingly common. People report streetlights that always go out when they walk by. Others notice kitchen lights that flicker only when they enter. Some mention hallway bulbs that dim just as they reach the switch. These aren't grand malfunctions. The lights don't explode. The power doesn't fail. It's just a flicker, a blink, a subtle drop in brightness. But the moment is sharp. Your senses catch it. The pattern registers. Streetlights operate on various systems. Some use sensors to manage brightness. Some have timers. Others run continuously. But like any hardware, they wear down. Wires loosen, bulbs age, contacts shift. If a connection is unstable, a small jolt, a vibration, a change in temperature, even minor air pressure can cause a flicker. Most of the time, no one notices. But when it lines up perfectly with your steps, your presence, your motion, the glitch feels targeted. The brain is built to find patterns. When you walk the same path every night, you start to expect certain things. The sound of your steps on the pavement, the click of the traffic light at the corner, the smell of leaves or fuel. These become part of the mental map of your route. When something breaks that pattern, a light flickers unexpectedly, it becomes the new detail your brain focuses on. And when it repeats, even a few times, the brain links it to your action. You walked. The light flickered. You walk again. It flickers again. Now it feels like cause and effect. You test it. You slow your steps. The light still flickers. You take a new route. The light stays on. You try ignoring it, but your eyes drift back anyway. You want to catch it in the act. You want proof. One night you bring someone along. You say nothing. They walk ahead of you. Nothing happens. You follow. The light flickers. Now it's no longer just in your head. Someone else saw it too. That makes it harder to dismiss. There are possible physical reasons for this. Human bodies carry static electricity. On dry days, when humidity is low, you build up more charge. Movement, friction from clothing, and even the soles of your shoes can increase it. Sensitive electronic components can react to electrical fields. If a sensor or circuit is already weak, a small burst of static from a nearby person could trip it. That doesn't mean you're causing it consciously. It just means that under the right conditions, your presence could be enough to disturb a failing system. There's also motion detection. Some newer streetlights have sensors that adjust brightness based on movement. They save energy by dimming when no one is near. But sensors aren't perfect. If they're misaligned or dirty, they might only trigger at specific angles or distances. You might be the right size, height, or walking pace to trigger the sensor where others don't. A taller person might pass without effect. A faster walker might miss the sensor's delay. You become the variable that lines up. But the deeper part of the experience isn't technical, it's emotional. You walk by the light and it flickers. You get used to it. You come to expect it. When it doesn't happen, that feels strange too. The glitch becomes part of your routine, a part of the environment that reacts only to you. It's not loud, it's not dangerous, but it's personal, it's yours. The flickering streetlight becomes a private signal, a quiet ritual, a beat in your nightly rhythm. Some people name their flickering lights. They say, "Oh, there's the blinking one," or "Let's see if my lamp reacts today." Others record videos, trying to catch the glitch on camera. It rarely works. The flicker doesn't follow orders. It happens when it wants to. That makes it feel alive. Not sentient, but unpredictable in a way that living things are. Children often notice this first. A kid might say, "The lamp blinks when I jump," or "That light doesn't like me." Adults often laugh it off, but the child is noticing something real, a pattern. They may not explain it with wiring or circuits, but they feel the connection, and the feeling sticks. Many adults remember their flickering light from years ago, a street they no longer walk, a hallway they no longer live in, but the light that blinked for them still shows up in their memory. In rare cases, this leads to stranger feelings. Someone passes a flickering light every day for weeks. One night, they walk the same path, but the light is steady. It's on, bright, no flicker. That's the break, the moment that feels wrong. You expect the flicker. When it's not there, you notice its absence. The routine changed. The world didn't play along. That reverse glitch is just as sharp as the original flicker. There's a term called SLA, street light interference. It's not a formal diagnosis. It's more a label for this phenomenon. People who say they cause lights to flicker are called sliders. They walk, lights react. They don't claim to control it. They just report it. Scientists don't accept SLI as a real effect. Most say it's coincidence, confirmation bias, and faulty memory. But that doesn't change the feeling for those who experience it. Whether the cause is technical, environmental, or mental, the moment feels real. The flicker happens. You remember. It's not just streetlights. People report lamps in their homes that turn off when they enter the room, office lights that dim when they reach their desk, headlights that dim as they walk by a parked car. These moments aren't dramatic. They don't cause panic, but they stir something subtle, a pause, a question. Did that just happen because of me? Even if you never talk about it, the moment stays. It's small, but it leaves an impression. The world, normally indifferent, responded in some tiny way. Not with words or signs, just a flicker, a pulse of light, enough to say, you were here, you passed, and the environment for 1 second seemed to notice. You lie down to sleep, and the dream begins again. You're standing in the same hallway. The light flickers the same way. The door at the end creaks open, just like it did the night before. You know what's going to happen next. You walk forward. You hear the same voice. You turn the same corner. You lie down to sleep, and the dream begins again. You're standing in the same hallway. The light flickers the same way. The door at the end creaks open, just like it did the night before. You know what's going to happen next. You walk forward. You hear the same voice. You turn the same corner. But tonight, one small thing is different. The hallway is a little longer. The voice sounds farther away. You wake up, unsettled, because it wasn't a repeat, it was a variation. It feels like the dream is changing on its own, night after night, and you're stuck inside it. This is what people describe as time loop dreams. You dream the same scenario again and again. It isn't always identical. Sometimes the events happen in the same order but feel slightly different. Other times, the dream resets each night with just one detail changed. Maybe the people you talk to use different words. Maybe the door that was locked last night is now open. Or maybe you make a different choice, turn left instead of right, but end up back in the same place anyway. These dreams feel different from regular dreams. Normal dreams jump around. 1 minute you're in school, the next you're on a boat. You wake up and forget most of it. But time loop dreams stick. They follow a structure. You can recognize the pattern. You know when you're in it. You sometimes even say to yourself, "Here we go again," while the dream is still happening. That recognition is what makes the loop feel real. Let's take a simple example. You dream you're at a train station. You're waiting for a train that never comes. Each night, you dream the same thing: the platform, the announcements, the people around you. But each time, something shifts. On the first night, you stand alone. On the second, someone stands next to you. On the third, the train arrives, but you miss it. On the fourth, you get on, but it goes in circles. Each dream connects to the last. You wake up and feel like your mind is running a simulation that won't stop. Time loop dreams don't have to be dramatic. Some are mundane. You dream about being in your kitchen, making tea. The kettle whistles, the cup chips, the light flickers. You wake up. The next night, it happens again, but this time, the water boils over. Or you drop the cup, or someone walks in and says something different. You keep dreaming the same location, the same sequence, the same rhythm. But the world shifts slowly, like it's changing behind the scenes. These dreams can feel frustrating. You might try to break the loop. You make a different decision in the dream. You run instead of walk. You try to talk to someone you ignored the night before. But no matter what you do, the dream snaps back to the same beginning. You wake up and hope that tonight it will stop. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it comes back weeks later, slightly altered, but still familiar. One theory says time loop dreams happen because your brain is trying to solve a problem. It sets up the same scenario to run again and again, making changes each time. Your mind is testing outcomes, like running simulations. If the dream is about a job interview, you might relive it over several nights, changing your answers each time. If the dream is about someone you lost, you might repeat the same final conversation, hoping to fix something that can't be fixed. Another idea is that these dreams reflect memory processing. During sleep, your brain moves information from short-term to long-term memory. It also tries to understand emotional experiences. If something has been bothering you, an argument, a missed opportunity, a fear, the brain may create a scene that mirrors that tension. The loop allows the brain to explore that feeling in different forms. The dream doesn't look exactly like your life, but it feels like it. Some people notice that time loop dreams often happen during stress. When your waking life is stuck, when you feel like you're repeating the same tasks, having the same conversations, or facing the same problems, your dreams might reflect that pattern. You go to work, come home, go to sleep, and dream about being trapped in a routine. The dream becomes a mirror of your real schedule, but it changes just enough to make you notice the cycle. The feeling of déjà vu is common in these dreams. You might walk into a room in the dream and think, "I've seen this before," even though you're still dreaming. That moment stands out. It's not just the setting, it's the timing, the details, the sense that you're revisiting a moment exactly as it was. But the déjà vu is part of the dream, not from real life. It makes the loop more vivid. It tricks you into thinking the dream world has rules and that it remembers you. People who keep dream journals often recognize time loops more easily. Writing down dreams helps you track what stays the same and what changes. You might notice that a particular door keeps showing up, or a certain number, or a street that always leads to the same house. The repetition doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be subtle. You wake up and realize, this is the third night I've dreamed about red shoes. That's a loop. The dream is echoing itself. In some dreams, you break the loop. On the final night, the scenario plays out differently. The dream ends with a resolution. You find the train, you leave the house, you wake up before the final step. You don't return to the loop again. This feels like closure. Your mind tested the variations and found one that worked. It doesn't mean the dream had a message. It means your brain resolved the pattern. In other cases, the loop fades gradually. You dream the same scene for a week, then less often. By the time a month passes, the dream is gone. You forget the details. Only the feeling remains. A soft memory of walking the same street again and again, trying to reach something that always moved one step ahead. Some people enjoy these dreams. They treat them like puzzles. They try to change the loop each night, like a video game level. They ask questions, explore hidden corners, talk to background characters. They turn the dream into a playground. The loop becomes a space to experiment, to imagine, to play out ideas they can't explore in waking life. Other people find the dreams exhausting. They wake up tired, emotionally drained. The repetition becomes heavy. It feels like they can't escape. The dream pushes them into the same emotions night after night: grief, fear, regret. They try to avoid sleep or change their schedule, hoping to break the loop. Sometimes it works. A change in routine, even small, can shift your dream pattern. Going to bed earlier, eating something different, listening to music before sleep. These actions can reset your mental environment. Time loop dreams blur the line between memory and imagination. They feel structured, but you're brushing your teeth late at night, the bathroom is quiet, the mirror is fogged around the edges from a recent shower. You look up, your face stares back. You glance to the left, so does your reflection. You blink, it blinks. You lean closer, it leans. Then, you're brushing your teeth late at night, the bathroom is quiet, the mirror is fogged around the edges from a recent shower. You look up, your face stares back. You glance to the left, so does your reflection. You blink, it blinks. You lean closer, it leans. Then, just for a split second, something doesn't match. Your eyelid twitches, but your reflection doesn't. Or maybe it's the opposite. Your reflection blinks before you do. You freeze. Did that really happen? You stare harder, waiting for another glitch. The mirror looks normal again, but something about that moment feels wrong. It sticks in your mind. This experience is unsettling because it breaks an expectation that's baked into your brain. When you move, your reflection should move exactly with you. It should mirror every gesture, blink, and expression at the same time. When that rhythm breaks, even for a moment, the brain notices. It might be a delay so brief you can't measure it, but you feel it. It's not just a mismatch in timing, it's a challenge to your sense of reality. Mirrors are built into our lives. We use them without thinking. You look into a mirror to fix your hair, adjust your clothes, check your face. You know it's just glass and silver. It's not magical, it's not watching you, it's bouncing back light. But because your reflection behaves exactly as you do, it feels like a living version of you. A silent twin, following your every move. When that twin missteps, blinks late, delays a smile, looks away too quickly, it feels like it has its own will. This effect happens more often than people admit. Most don't talk about it because it sounds strange. How can a reflection blink out of sync? It doesn't make sense. Mirrors don't think, they don't lag. But the experience is real to the person who sees it. They remember it clearly. The reflection felt wrong. Not monstrous, not unrecognizable, just not exact. There are some technical explanations. One is related to how the brain processes motion. Your eyes constantly shift and adjust. These movements are called saccades. During a saccade, the brain suppresses visual input for a split second. You don't notice it, but your brain fills in the gap. It smooths your vision, so the world looks continuous. In a mirror, if your brain delays processing your own movement for a fraction of a second, your reflection might appear to move first. It's not the mirror acting strange, it's your brain playing catch-up. Lighting also matters. In dim light, especially late at night, the brain works harder to track motion and detail. Shadows can distort perception. If there's flickering from a TV in another room, a nearby candle, or an overhead bulb about to burn out, these changes can trick the brain. You see your face, but it seems different. Maybe your pupils look the wrong size. Maybe one eyebrow lifts more than it should. These aren't tricks of the mirror. They're tricks of light and expectation. Another factor is something called the Troxler effect. When you stare at one spot for too long, your brain begins to filter out details in your peripheral vision. You stop seeing parts of the image. If you're staring at your own eyes in the mirror, the edges of your face may begin to blur or change. Features might fade slightly. You might see movement that isn't there. The mind fills in blanks based on memory and habit, but the result can be a warped version of your own reflection. There's also the cognitive load effect. If you're tired, emotionally stressed, or sleep-deprived, your ability to process accurate visual information decreases. The brain begins to interpret sensory data through emotion and memory, not just logic. You walk into the bathroom at 3 a.m., half asleep, and stare into the mirror. You're not alert. Your thoughts drift. Your mind might replay a recent argument, a sad moment, a fear. Your reflection mirrors you, but now it feels separate, like it's watching, not reflecting. You blink and it lags by a hair. That's enough to make the moment feel wrong. Mirrors are also tied to identity. You see yourself in them, You form your self-image based on what you see. That image becomes familiar, but it's flipped. The part in your hair is reversed. Your smile tilts the opposite way. The mole on your cheek appears on the wrong side. You're used to this mirror version. So if you see yourself in a video or photo later, it often looks strange. That's because it's how other people see you, unflipped. Your mirror self is the version you trust. When that version behaves in a way you didn't expect, the feeling can be deeply unsettling. There are stories from people who spend long hours alone and start seeing their reflections act independently. They say the face in the mirror doesn't match their expression exactly. They smile, and it smiles slower. They blink, and it holds eye contact just a second too long. These stories aren't about ghosts or hallucinations. They're about perception. The person knows they're seeing their own reflection. But the moment challenges that certainty. People who meditate or practice mirror gazing, staring into their own eyes for extended periods, sometimes report similar effects. The face in the mirror changes, features stretch or contract. The eyes look darker or lighter. Some people say they see the face of a parent, a younger version of themselves, or even a stranger. These changes aren't real. The face hasn't moved. But the brain, deprived of new visual input, begins to fill the silence with something else. Memory, fear, imagination. The longer you look, the more your reflection seems to look back. Mirrors have been used in stories and superstitions for centuries. They're said to hold souls, trap spirits, or act as windows to other worlds. Those ideas come from the same place, a deep sense that mirrors are more than glass. They show us something familiar that isn't quite us. A delay in a blink, a twitch that doesn't match, a smile that's not entirely yours. These moments disturb not because they're dramatic, but because they're subtle. The wrongness is small, but it cuts deep. You may walk away, shake it off, tell yourself you imagined it. But you remember. You might test it again later. You'll look into the mirror and blink deliberately. You'll tilt your head, watch closely, wait for the mistake. Usually it doesn't come back. The reflection behaves, but now you're aware. You watch differently. You don't take the mirror's response for granted. Even if you never see the mismatch again, the memory lingers. It changes how you feel when you see yourself. The mirror you're in a bookstore, flipping through a children's book you remember from years ago. You read it all the time as a kid. You know the title, you know the characters. It's burned into your memory. But as you look at the cover, something feels off. You read the name again. It says Berenstain Bears. That's wrong. You're sure it was Berenstain. You say it out loud. You always said Steen, not Stain. You even remember the way the letters looked. You check other copies. They all say the same thing. Berenstain. You feel confused, then slightly uneasy. You're not just wrong. You're certain you're right, but the world disagrees. This is what people call the Mandela Effect. It's when a large group of people remember something a certain way, but the record shows it never happened that way. The name comes from Nelson Mandela. Some people clearly remember him dying in prison in the 1980s. They remember news reports, a public funeral, even reactions from world leaders. But Nelson Mandela didn't die in the 1980s. He was released, became president of South Africa, and lived until 2013. Yet the memory feels real for the people who have it. The effect has spread to dozens of examples. People remember the Monopoly man having a monocle, but he doesn't. Not in any version of the game. People recall the peanut butter brand Jiffy, but it's Jif. People swear the cartoon about the mischievous Looney Tunes characters was spelled Looney Tunes, but it's always been Tunes. Ask someone how the line in Star Wars goes. They'll probably say, "Luke, I am your father." That's not what Darth Vader says. The actual line is, "No, I am your father." But the misquote is so common that even actors and directors repeat it. These moments are small, but they create a ripple. They challenge your memory. They make you wonder how something you were so sure of could be wrong. It's not the same as forgetting a name or misplacing your keys. Those mistakes are easy to explain. This is different. It's the feeling that your memory belongs to a version of the world that no longer exists. One explanation for the Mandela Effect is that memory is not a recording device. It's not like a camera. The brain doesn't store events like files on a hard drive. It reconstructs them. Every time you remember something, your brain pulls pieces together: sights, sounds, emotions, context. Then it rebuilds the memory. It fills in gaps with what makes sense. Over time, details shift. If you were young when you saw the Berenstain Bears, your brain might have filed the name under the more common Stein spelling. That's a familiar pattern, like Frankenstein, Einstein, Goldstein. Stain is less common, so your brain didn't register it. Years later, when you see the correct spelling, it clashes with the version your brain reinforced again and again. Another factor is collective reinforcement. If enough people say something happened a certain way, your brain is more likely to accept it. You might not have thought much about the spelling of a cartoon bear family, but then someone posts about Berenstain online. You see the post. You think, yes, that's how I remember it too. More people comment. The memory gains weight. The group agreement becomes stronger than the actual evidence. It feels like confirmation, but it's just reinforcement of a shared error. Media adds to this. A misquoted movie line, a parody, or a meme can overwrite the original. If a comedian says, "Luke, I am your father," and the audience laughs, that becomes the version people remember. It's more dramatic. It's more quotable. It fits the emotion of the scene. The brain remembers what sticks, not necessarily what's true. There are also issues with visual memory. The Monopoly man with a monocle fits a mental picture of a wealthy cartoon businessman. You associate monocles with rich characters, so the brain adds it, it completes the image. Over time, you no longer remember the original drawing. You remember the image your brain built. The Mandela Effect feels strange because it doesn't just change facts, it changes confidence. You don't feel unsure about what you remember, you feel certain. That certainty is what makes the effect unsettling. It's not, "I think it was like this." It's, "I know it was like this." You remember where you were when you saw it. You remember who you were with. You remember saying it out loud. That level of detail makes the contradiction harder to accept. Some people take the idea further. They say the Mandela Effect could be proof of parallel realities. Maybe there was a timeline where the spelling really was Berenstain, and people who remember it that way somehow crossed into this timeline. That idea isn't supported by science, but it shows how powerful the feeling can be. When reality contradicts memory, some people would rather believe the world changed than accept that their brain made a mistake. There's another explanation rooted in how the brain handles categories. The brain groups things by similarity. If you see Fruit Loops, you might remember it as Fruit Loops, or vice versa, because the brain is sorting by sound, not spelling. If you see the children's book Curious George, you might remember him swinging by his tail, even though he doesn't have one. Why? Because monkeys usually have tails. The brain adds that detail to fit the category. Time adds more pressure. The longer ago the memory formed, the more likely it has shifted. You remember Sex and the City, but you say Sex in the City. You've seen the show, but the title didn't stand out. The word "in" feels more natural in speech, so your brain smooths it out. Later, you hear the correct name, and it feels wrong, even though it's been right the whole time. Some Mandela effects come from early misprints or regional differences. A VHS cover, an old cereal box, a commercial, any of these might have used a wrong version once, then corrected it later. If you saw the wrong version first, it might have planted the false memory. Then repetition locked it in. Or maybe the correct version was always there, but it never made a strong impression. Your memory filled in the blanks with what felt right. It's easy to say these are just mix-ups, but they don't feel that way. They feel like cracks in the world. You see an old photo, and the logo looks off. You swear something used to be blue, but now it's green. You hear a song lyric and feel like it changed since the last time you heard it. These aren't hallucinations. They're real, shared misremembrances. They reveal how memory works and how fragile it can be. The Mandela Effect isn't about being gullible or forgetful. It's about how the mind protects you. It builds stories that make sense. It connects pieces that feel true. And once it builds a picture, it holds on to it. That's why the moment of realization hits so hard. You're not just correcting a fact, you're rewriting something you believed for years. Something that felt true because it lived inside you, not just as a detail, but as a memory. And memory, for most of us, is where reality begins. You tell a story at dinner about the time you fell off a swing and broke your arm in second grade. You remember the playground, The crowd of kids, the teacher running over. You even remember the cast and how people signed it with markers. But your parents stop you. They say that never happened. You never broke your arm. You never wore a cast. You weren't even in that class that year. You pause. You're sure it's real. You remember it like you were there. You can see it. You can feel it. But everyone around you says it didn't happen. This is what's known as a false memory. It's not a lie. It's not something you made up on purpose. It's a memory that feels real, but doesn't match the facts. You're not guessing. You're not imagining. You remember it clearly. But when you check, by asking people, looking at records, or going back to the place, you find out it's not true. It never happened. False memories aren't rare. Everyone has them. You might remember seeing a movie that doesn't exist. You might swear you locked the front door, but later see it was left wide open. You might argue that a song had a certain lyric, then look it up and realize you were off. These are not just slips. They feel certain in the moment. That certainty is what makes them so interesting and so confusing. The brain doesn't store memory like a video. It doesn't save perfect files. Instead, it keeps fragments. It stores sights, sounds, emotions, and details in separate places. When you remember something, your brain pulls those pieces back together. But every time it does, it risks error. It might grab the wrong face, the wrong setting, or the wrong emotion. Then it rebuilds the memory using that mix. To you, the memory feels whole, but it's not exactly what happened. Memory is also shaped by suggestion. If someone says, "Remember the time we saw that clown at the party?" You might say, "Oh yeah." Even if you didn't see a clown, your brain might build that image using clues from the moment. If someone you trust insists something happened, your brain might adjust your memory to fit. Over time, that adjusted version becomes the only version you know. One classic example is the Lost in the Mall study. Researchers told participants that their parents remembered them getting lost in a shopping mall as a child. The event wasn't real. But after a few interviews, some people began to remember the event. They added details, what the mall looked like, who helped them, how they felt. They believed it. They could describe it, but it never happened. Their brains filled in the story and made it feel real. The same thing can happen with photos. If someone shows you a picture and says you were there, your mind might start building a memory around it. Even if you weren't there, your brain pulls pieces from other memories. Another event, another time, a similar place. The result is a memory that feels personal. You can picture the event. You feel like you lived it. But it's a blend. It's not real. False memories also happen when multiple events blur together. Say you visited a museum as a kid. You also watched a TV show about dinosaurs. Years later, you remember seeing a giant dinosaur skeleton in that museum. You tell people about it. You describe it. But the museum never had one. Your brain mixed the show with the visit. It didn't do this on purpose. It just stitched together the parts that fit. Stress and trauma can also shape false memories. In high-stress situations, the brain focuses on survival. It may not encode details clearly. Later, when you try to remember, your mind fills in the gaps. You might add people who weren't there. You might shift the timeline. The event feels sharp, but the facts are loose. This is why eyewitness accounts often conflict, even when everyone believes they're telling the truth. Another version is misremembering when something happened. You think a trip to the lake happened the summer before high school, but your sister says it was 2 years earlier. You argue. You remember packing your green sweatshirt. You remember the music you were listening to. But then you find a photo. You're wearing a shirt you didn't own until much later. Your memory is clear, but the timeline is off. This isn't failure. It's just how the mind works. The way people talk about events can shift your memory too. A friend says, "That restaurant had those hanging lights," and now that detail becomes part of your memory, even if it wasn't there. Or someone says, "You were so mad that night," and over time, you start to remember the event with more anger than you actually felt. Language can steer memory, not with force, but with direction. Repeating a version of a story can overwrite the original memory. Some false memories start in dreams. You dream about being on a beach with friends. Later, you remember the dream as a real event. You picture the waves, the sand, the conversation. You assume it happened. If no one corrects you, the dream becomes part of your mental timeline. You may even add it to stories you tell. It blends in. You forget where it came from. These kinds of memory slips are not flaws. They're part of how the brain makes sense of the world. Memory is built for meaning, not precision. It helps you learn, make decisions, and connect events. But that flexibility means it can also bend. It can bend without warning. And when it does, you may not notice. False memories often go unnoticed unless someone challenges them. A friend says, "You weren't there," and suddenly you feel disoriented. You go quiet. You question yourself. How could you remember something that didn't happen? But that's what memory is. It's not a perfect record. It's a reconstruction, a guess, sometimes accurate, sometimes not. And the more confident you are, the more surprising it is when that memory turns out to be false. In everyday life, this shows up all the time. You remember emailing someone, but they say they never got it. You picture putting your wallet on the table, but it's not there. You're sure you turned off the stove, but the burner is still hot. These moments aren't just about attention. They're about how the brain fills in what it thinks should have happened. You walk into a room, feel like you've already been there today. You swear you had that conversation already. You remember telling someone about the appointment, but none of it happened. Your brain might be pulling pieces from similar days, similar places, similar tasks. It's building a memory that fits the shape of your routine. That's why it feels right, even when it's wrong. False memories aren't failure. They're a side effect of a brain that prioritizes meaning, emotion, and pattern over perfect detail. The moments they create feel as real as anything else. You see them, you hear them, you believe them. And when they get corrected, the result isn't just surprise. It's a small shift in your sense of reality. A reminder that even your own past can change. Not because the facts moved, but because your mind did. You're sitting on the couch watching TV. A scene ends. The screen fades to black. In that brief pause, you feel like you just adjusted your position. Maybe you shifted your legs or leaned forward. But when the screen lights back up, you're still in the exact same place. Nothing changed. You didn't move. You thought you moved. You felt like you moved. But you didn't. That moment doesn't make sense. You replay it in your mind. You were sure your body did something. You try again, wiggle your toes, lift your arm, shift your back. Everything works. You're not paralyzed. But the earlier feeling stays with you. You remember the motion. The body just didn't follow. This kind of experience is called an echoed movement. It's when your brain registers the intention or even the sensation of a movement, but no physical action happened. You might be lying in bed and feel like you just rolled over. You might be walking and feel like you already took a step, but your foot hasn't moved yet. These are not dreams. You're awake. Your eyes are open. Your surroundings are real. But your body and your sense of motion don't line up. Most of the time, you don't notice small movements. You shift constantly without thinking. You cross your arms, lean to one side, tap your fingers. These movements happen with little attention. But when that process skips, when the feeling of motion happens without the motion itself, it grabs your focus. You blink, you pause. You wonder how the memory of moving appeared when the body stayed still. The body uses multiple systems to track movement. One is proprioception. That's your sense of where your body is in space. Even with your eyes closed, you know where your arms are. You can raise your hand without looking and touch your nose. That awareness comes from sensors in your muscles and joints. They tell the brain how the body is positioned and whether it's moving. But that system isn't perfect. If the brain fires a signal to move, and you expect the movement to follow, you may register the result before it happens, or even when it never happens. Another system involved is motor planning. Before you move, your brain prepares the steps. If you're about to stand up, it doesn't just tell your legs to lift. It activates the muscles, balances your weight, and predicts how your body will shift. This happens milliseconds before you act. Sometimes the brain plans the move, and you mentally feel it. But something interrupts the signal. The movement doesn't follow, but the prediction stays. You're left with the impression that you moved when you didn't. You might be in a lecture hall. You shift slightly in your seat, or at least you think you did. But you look down and your hands are still folded. You check your legs, they haven't moved. But the memory of moving is clear. You can almost feel the air brushing your skin, the chair creaking. But none of it happened. The echo of the movement feels just as strong as the real thing. You can't prove it didn't happen. You just know something's off. This doesn't only happen when you're sitting still. Some people feel echoed movements during walking. You're about to step onto the curb. You lift your leg, or think you do, but your foot is still flat. Your brain predicted the action, sent the command, but for a fraction of a second, the movement didn't come. You catch yourself. You step late, but your mind already moved ahead. Athletes sometimes report this too. In high-speed sports, movement is automatic. A tennis player may swing before the ball arrives. Their brain predicts the motion, but if they hesitate, the swing doesn't come. Still, for a moment, it feels like they followed through. The body stayed frozen, but the movement played out in the mind. That mental shadow stays behind, like a skipped heartbeat. Another place this happens is right before sleep. It's called a hypnagogic jerk. You're falling asleep and feel like you just tripped or fell. Your body jerks suddenly. Sometimes you feel like you turned in bed. You're sure you rolled to the other side, but you open your eyes and see you're in the exact same position. You didn't move. The brain simulated the shift. The muscles didn't respond. That disconnect triggers confusion. It's fast but memorable. The reverse can also happen. You move, but you don't feel it until after. You wake up and realize your arm is already behind your head. You don't remember moving it there. There was no conscious choice, no transition. The result is there, but the process is missing. That absence of experience is the opposite of the echo. The motion happened without the mind tracking it. Stress, fatigue, and illness can make echoed movements more common. When your body is tired, the brain may misfire signals or delay feedback. You think you nodded, but you're still upright. You think you raised your hand, but it's still in your lap. These are not dramatic errors. They're tiny skips, like lag in a video. Most of the time, the brain catches up and corrects, but when it doesn't, the mismatch sticks. People who meditate sometimes experience echoed movements too. They sit still for long periods. The body rests, the mind wanders. They suddenly feel like they just shifted their spine or tilted their head. But they didn't. The body stayed centered. The movement was imagined. Or maybe it was planned and canceled. But the trace remains, a ghost of a gesture. This also happens in virtual reality. You reach out to grab something, and your real hand doesn't move. But your brain expected motion. The simulation triggered the command, but not the action. The gap feels unnatural. You jerk back, confused. You feel like you moved, but there's no movement. That's the echo. The predicted motion arrives, but the body stays silent. Echoed movements are different from dreams, hallucinations, or illusions. They happen in clear awareness. You're not asleep. You're not imagining something abstract. You're just living, and suddenly the body doesn't match the memory. The dissonance is sharp. It may only last a second. But in that second, your trust in your own body wavers. Sometimes the moment is harmless. You chuckle, stretch, and move on. Other times, it lingers. You keep thinking about it. You wonder why you felt something that didn't happen. You test it again, shift your weight, tap your foot, raise your arms. Everything works. But the echo doesn't return. That makes it feel even more like a glitch. One moment, the body said yes. The next, it stayed still. You know it's not dangerous. But the strangeness stays, the memory of emotion that left no trace behind. You're walking outside, the sky is clear, a few birds fly overhead, then one of them stops, not completely, but enough that it looks wrong. Its wings don't flap, it stays in the same spot, hovering. It doesn't move forward or backward, it just floats there. You stop walking, you stare. Maybe the wind is holding it in place, but the air is still. There's no breeze. The bird doesn't seem to struggle. It doesn't look scared. It just hangs in the sky like someone pressed pause. You wait for it to flap again. It takes longer than you expect. Finally, it twitches and glides away. You keep walking, but the moment stays with you. This kind of thing happens more than people admit. You're sitting on a bench and a squirrel freezes on a branch. It doesn't twitch or blink. It doesn't move its tail. You count seconds. 10 go by, then 20. Still no motion. You wonder if it's real. You shift your weight. The squirrel still doesn't move. You cough. Nothing. Then, with no warning, it darts off. Fast and sharp, like it was never frozen at all. The contrast makes the moment feel unreal. Birds are some of the most noticeable when they behave this way. You expect movement from them. You expect flapping, darting, sudden shifts in direction. But sometimes a bird will land and sit perfectly still. It won't groom itself. It won't look around. It will face one direction and stay there for long stretches. You wave your arms. It doesn't respond. You try to get its attention. Nothing changes. The stillness feels unnatural. One explanation comes from how animals use motion to avoid danger. In the wild, stillness is survival. If a predator is nearby, movement gives you away. So animals learn to freeze. They hold their breath. They avoid blinking. They wait for the threat to pass. But when there's no predator, just a sidewalk, a street lamp, or a backyard, the same behavior looks strange. You expect reaction. When it doesn't come, the stillness feels out of place. Sometimes birds stare at things you can't see. They'll fix their gaze on an empty patch of sky or ground. They won't blink or move for a long time. You follow their line of sight. There's nothing there. No insect, no reflection, no sound. The bird looks locked into place, like it's watching something that doesn't exist. You walk closer, expecting it to fly away. It doesn't. It just stands there, staring through you or past you. Then it blinks once and takes off, casual and slow. This behavior happens with dogs too. You're sitting in a room. The dog lifts its head and looks at a corner. There's nothing there. No light, no shadow, no noise. But the dog stares, ears forward, body alert. You call its name. No response. You clap. Still no reaction. Then, as suddenly as it started, the dog relaxes. It lies back down and acts normal again. You're left wondering what it saw. Cats often do this too. They'll sit and stare at a blank wall for several minutes. Their eyes widen. Their pupils shift. Sometimes their ears move as if they're hearing something. You check the wall. Nothing's there. You run your hand over it. No insects, no marks. You hold your phone near it to check for noise. Still nothing. The cat doesn't blink. It just watches. These moments don't last long, maybe a minute or two, but they create a strange feeling. You trust your senses. You look, you listen, you see nothing, but the animal reacts as if something is happening. You start to feel like you're missing something, like the world has more layers than you can perceive. Some people try to explain this using animal senses. Birds can see ultraviolet light. Cats and dogs can hear higher frequencies than humans. Maybe they're responding to sounds, lights, or vibrations we can't detect. That's possible, but the experience still feels strange. It's not just that the animal is reacting to something you can't see. It's the way they freeze, the way they seem to disconnect from the world around them, the way they behave as if time slowed down just for them. There are also reports of birds hovering too perfectly. You see a bird midair, and it doesn't sway or adjust. Its wings stay extended. Its body doesn't tilt. You expect a gust of wind to move it, but it stays locked. You blink and check again, still in the same place. You pull out your phone to record it, but by the time the camera opens, the bird has flown away. You question whether it really hovered that long, but you remember how it looked, suspended, still, out of step with the world. Another example happens when birds fly in a group. You see a flock moving across the sky. Then one bird breaks off and stops mid-flight. It flutters briefly, then holds its position. The rest of the flock keeps going. The lone bird seems to forget it was flying. It doesn't rejoin the group. It just hovers or glides in slow circles. You watch it, waiting for it to snap back into motion. Eventually it does, but not with urgency. It moves slowly, as if waking from a pause. Sometimes the animal's behavior becomes part of your own memory. You tell someone about it. You say, "I saw this bird just freeze in midair. It didn't flap or move for almost a minute." They raise an eyebrow. They ask what kind of bird it was. You don't remember. You just remember the stillness, the silence, the sense that for one moment, something paused the normal flow of time. In rural areas, people tell stories about deer that stop in the middle of a field and don't move for long periods. No grazing, no tail flicks, just stillness. If you watch long enough, they'll eventually twitch an ear or lift a hoof. But for minutes at a time, they look like statues. If you approach too fast, they dart away in a flash. But if you keep your distance, the stillness stays. You almost forget they're alive. These moments don't carry messages. They don't lead to big events. But they change how you move through space. You look at birds differently. You notice squirrels more. You watch for motion or the lack of it. You remember how it felt when the world didn't behave the way it usually does, when a bird floated like it was weightless, when a dog stared at air like it saw something important, when a moment stretched longer than it should have. You keep that memory. You wait for it to happen again. And sometimes it does. You walk into the kitchen, you stop, you look around, you have no idea why you came in. You try to retrace your thoughts, but nothing comes. You stand there in silence, scanning the room for clues. A cup, a note, something on the counter that might remind you. But the reason is gone. It's like it vanished the second you crossed the doorway. You think, maybe I was hungry, or maybe I needed to check something, but nothing feels right. The thought is just gone. So you walk back to where you came from. Sometimes that helps. You return to the hallway or the bedroom, and then it hits you. You wanted to grab your phone charger. You head back toward the kitchen again, annoyed that you forgot something so basic in just a few steps. This is what people call a teleportation glitch. It's not actual teleportation, of course. You didn't vanish and reappear, but it feels like you stepped through a portal. One moment you had a clear goal, and the next you were blank. Not distracted, not confused, just suddenly reset. You didn't just forget the task, you forgot the intention itself. It didn't fade, it cut off. The mental thread snapped as soon as you walked through the door. This happens to everyone. It's not a sign of memory loss or distraction. It's a known effect in psychology called the doorway effect. It refers to the phenomenon where walking through a physical doorway disrupts your short-term memory. It doesn't matter how big the doorway is. It doesn't matter how far you're going. It could be moving from the kitchen to the hall or from the garage to the living room. The moment your body crosses the threshold, your mind sometimes drops the thread it was holding. This happens because of how your brain organizes memory and attention. Your brain stores events and tasks in what are called event models. These models include your goal, your location, and the context around you. When you change rooms, your brain assumes the context has changed, so it updates the model. The update clears out some of the working memory, what you were just thinking, because your brain assumes that information no longer applies. It's a form of mental housekeeping. The system works most of the time, but sometimes it throws out the one thing you needed to remember. You might be in your office and think, I need a pen. You stand up and walk toward the kitchen where you last saw one. On the way there, you pass through a hallway. Your brain registers a new space. It starts building a new event model. You are now in the hallway. It begins to forget the details of what you were doing in the office. By the time you reach the kitchen, the memory of needing a pen is gone. You stand in front of the drawers and think, what was I doing? This also explains why people sometimes walk into a room and just stand there, silent and blank for several seconds. It's not always about being busy or distracted. It's about how memory links itself to location. Once you're in a new space, the brain treats it as a new chapter. If the previous chapter had a goal, it might not carry over unless you hold on to it consciously. But that's not always easy, especially if the goal was something small, like grabbing socks, checking the oven, or picking up your keys. Sometimes you try to cover for it. You open a cabinet or touch an object, hoping it will remind you what you were doing. You move around slowly, letting your body act as if it remembers, even though your mind doesn't. Other times, you go back to where the thought started. You sit on the same couch, walk back through the same doorway, and the goal returns. The charger, the notebook, the leftovers you meant to reheat. It comes back, not as a new thought, but as a memory suddenly reattached to its place. This glitch isn't limited to walking through rooms. It happens when you pick up your phone to do something and suddenly find yourself scrolling through social media without remembering why you opened the screen. Or you sit down at your desk to write an email, open your inbox, and forget who you were writing to. These are not the same as distractions. A distraction pulls you away from your task. A teleportation glitch deletes the task from your mind. You're left with the shell of the action, but none of the purpose behind it. There's also a physical feeling that comes with it. You feel slightly displaced. You were moving with purpose, but now your body is still and your mind is blank. You look around like a visitor in your own space. The room feels unfamiliar for a few seconds, even if you've lived there for years. This feeling passes quickly, but while it lasts, it makes the glitch feel deeper than just forgetting. It feels like you slipped out of sync with yourself. These moments can happen multiple times a day. You might walk from your car to the front door, then stand outside for a second, unsure if you locked the doors. You might open the fridge and forget what you came for. You might step into the shower and forget whether you already washed your hair. These aren't failures of attention. They're byproducts of how the mind files and resets information across changes in environment. Your brain tries to be efficient. It tracks space and context together. When one changes, the brain adjusts. That adjustment is useful when switching tasks or entering new environments. But in everyday life, it means small intentions can vanish the moment you cross a boundary. The memory wasn't erased. It was simply misplaced, tied to the room behind you. Sometimes people describe the experience in stranger terms. They say it feels like time skipped, like they were pulled out of one timeline and dropped into another, like they were switched off and on again. These descriptions aren't scientific, but they reflect the depth of the disconnection. You didn't forget slowly. You lost the thread all at once, in a way that feels out of your control. You try to adapt. You talk to yourself more. You say, "I need the scissors," out loud, hoping the sound will anchor the task in your mind. You carry a list. You repeat steps. You tell others not to interrupt you when you're about to do something. You try to hold on to the thread, and sometimes it works. Sometimes you walk through the doorway, remember what you came for, and smile to yourself. No glitch this time. Not today. You're walking down the same street you pass every morning. The corner store is up ahead, the one with the red sign. You don't even need to look. You know it says Maple Mart. You've read it 100 times, maybe more. You've told people about it. You've bought snacks there. But today, when you look up, the sign doesn't say Maple Mart. It says Maple Market. You stop. You stare at it. It's the same colors, the same shape, the same building, but the name has changed. You think, maybe they added the extra letters overnight. Maybe it was always Market and you just shortened it in your head. But you're sure that's not the case. You're sure the sign was different. Yesterday it had 6 letters, now it has more. You glance around, checking for signs of renovation. There's no ladder, no tools, no new paint. The sign doesn't look fresh, it looks settled, as if it's been that way for years. You keep walking, but now you're watching everything more closely. You check the cafe's name across the street, you check the street signs, you check the pharmacy on the corner. Everything looks the same, but you're not sure anymore. You're not sure if you remember them clearly or if you just think you do. This moment is quiet. It doesn't create panic, but it creates confusion. Not the kind that fades in seconds, but the kind that stays with you. You question yourself. You try to dig up a memory of the sign in a photo, of a receipt, of someone saying it aloud. But the harder you try to remember, the more your mind slides around it. You feel a gap where certainty used to be. Sometimes it's not a name that changes. It's a color. You remember the bakery's sign being green, a soft green, almost pastel. But today, it's a deep blue. You can still picture the green in your mind, the way it looked on cloudy days. But now the blue sign hangs above the door, looking completely normal. You ask yourself if you just misremembered it, if maybe it faded in the sun. But the blue isn't faded. It's rich. It doesn't look new. It looks like it's always been there. Other times, it's a change in layout. A sign that used to have the business name on top and the tagline below has reversed. The tagline is now large, centered, and the name is smaller. You stand across the street, trying to remember if it always looked like that. You think about how you saw it from the bus window every day. But the mental picture doesn't match what's in front of you now. These changes don't happen often, but when they do, they stand out. Not because they're big, but because they break your trust in familiar things. A sign is supposed to be stable. It's a marker, a label, a fixed point in the environment. When it shifts without warning, even slightly, it makes you feel unsteady. People often dismiss these moments. They say, "You just didn't notice," or "They probably updated the sign last week." That might be true. Stores rebrand. Businesses get new owners. Street signs get replaced. But that doesn't explain the certainty you feel. You don't just think the name was different. You remember it. You see it in your mind. You can almost trace the letters. That memory isn't weak, it feels solid, which makes the current sign feel like it came from somewhere else. One reason these moments happen is because your brain doesn't record every detail. It takes shortcuts. If you pass the same store every day, your brain starts to ignore the fine points. You stop reading the sign. You rely on memory. If the sign changes slowly, maybe a letter at a time, you might not notice until something finally snaps you into awareness. Then you see the difference all at once, and it feels like a sudden shift. Lighting can also change how a sign looks. A white sign under morning light might look yellow in the evening. A red sign might look almost brown in shadow. You could pass the same sign in different conditions and get a different impression. If you're not looking directly, your brain might register the color differently each time. But when you finally stop and focus, the new version clashes with your remembered one. Your attention also plays a role. On most days, you're not analyzing street names or storefront fonts. You're thinking about your schedule, your errands, your phone. If a sign is familiar enough, you don't check it anymore. Your brain files it away as a known element. But when you finally do pay attention, what you see might not match the version in your head. That mismatch can feel like the world shifted behind your back. Sometimes these changes happen digitally. You check Google Maps and the restaurant you ate at last week now has a different name. You're confused. You check your photos. The sign in the background of the selfie doesn't match the new name. You ask a friend. They say the name changed months ago, but you were just there. You saw the old sign. You know it. Still, the new name is already on receipts, on the website, even on the storefront. It's like someone swapped it out and rewrote the past. Other people have the same experiences. They walk past a street sign they've seen for years and realize the name is spelled differently. Wellesley now has 2 S instead of 3. Ashburn is suddenly Ashburn. They try to find old documents, mail, or maps. Sometimes they find proof that matches their memory. Other times, every record matches the new spelling. They feel disoriented, like the city changed and nobody else noticed. These glitches can go deeper. A person swears a local shop used to be called Sunnyside Gifts, but now it's Sunny Sight. They ask around. Everyone else remembers it as Sunny Sight. They feel alone in their memory, but the feeling stays. They remember the sign in daylight, the way the S is curled, the colors, the spacing. It's not a vague feeling. It's a picture, clear and persistent. When these moments happen repeatedly, people start checking more. They take photos of signs. They write down names. They become hyper-aware of details most people ignore. They don't trust memory alone anymore. They want proof. Because once you see something change that wasn't supposed to, it's hard to look away. You start noticing the small things, the things that seem like they shouldn't move, and yet sometimes they do. You're walking to the store, someone nearby is talking on the phone. You catch one word, mangrove. It stands out because it's unusual. You haven't heard that word in months, maybe years. You keep walking. 2 blocks later, you pass a billboard. It's for a nature documentary. In big, bold letters, it says, "Explore the mangrove forests." You stop for a second. That's strange. You just heard that word. You weren't thinking about it. It wasn't on your mind. Now it's right in front of you. This kind of moment doesn't happen every day, but when it does, it feels sharp. It grabs your attention. The word jumps out. You look around, almost waiting for something else to follow. Then later that night, you scroll through your phone. Someone posts a photo from a beach trip with the caption, "Nothing like mangroves at sunset." That's 3 times in one day. A word you weren't thinking about. A word that barely comes up. Now it's everywhere. You don't know what to make of it. This is what people call synchronicity. It's when 2 or more events connect in a meaningful way, even though there's no clear link. The events don't cause each other, but they happen close together, and they match in a way that feels too close to be chance. A word, an image, a number, a name, you see or hear it once, and then it appears again. Sometimes in minutes, sometimes in hours. The repeat is what makes it strange. It doesn't feel random, it feels placed. Let's take another example. You're watching a show. A character mentions tortoiseshell cats. You make a mental note because you don't hear that phrase often. A minute later, you open a group chat. Someone just posted a photo of their new pet. It's a tortoiseshell cat. You blink. You go back to the show. You rewind. Did they really say that? They did. Then you check the chat. The photo's timestamp is from a few seconds ago. You wonder if your phone's listening. You wonder if there's a connection. But the truth is, there isn't one you can prove. The timing is just too close. This isn't about hearing something common like coffee or weather. It's the rare words that stick. Things like fjord, pumice, trapezoid. Words you don't hear every day. Words that mean something specific. When those start showing up back to back, it breaks your sense of flow. You feel like you've stepped into a loop. Sometimes the word matches something personal. You're thinking about someone from high school you haven't seen in years. Their name pops into your head. A few minutes later, you hear that same name on the radio. It's part of a song lyric, or it's the name of an artist. You haven't thought about them in forever. Now their name is spoken aloud right after you remembered them. You pause. You think about texting them. You wonder if they're okay. You wonder why their name showed up again today. The brain notices patterns. It's built to connect things. If you hear something strange and then see it again, your brain flags it. It creates a mental highlight. That's normal. But what makes synchronicity overload different is when it keeps happening. You hear one word, then you see it, then you hear it again. The cycle repeats. It's not just once, it's 3, 4, 5 times in a short period. And not just with one word, with several. You feel like the world is echoing back pieces of your own thoughts. Sometimes it feels playful. You think of a phrase like umbrella bird, and a minute later someone says it in a podcast. You laugh. It feels like the universe is in on the joke. Other times it feels eerie. You read an article about an obscure disease, and later that day someone brings it up out of nowhere. You don't know them. You weren't talking about health. They just mention it casually. You feel your skin tighten. That wasn't supposed to happen. You start to notice it more, not because it's new, but because you're paying attention. You walk past a conversation. A stranger says, "Hazel eyes." You look up. That's the line from the book you just finished reading. You check a comment section online. Someone types, "Hazel eyes are underrated." That's 3 hits in under an hour. You stop and think, why this word? Why now? These experiences don't come with answers. No voice explains what's going on. No signal flashes. The moments arrive, line up, then disappear. But they stay in your mind. You remember where you were. You remember the order. You remember how unlikely it felt. Some people try to explain synchronicity by saying your brain is primed. Once a word enters your mind, you're more likely to notice it. That's called the frequency illusion. It's like buying a red car and then seeing red cars everywhere. But that doesn't explain the timing. It doesn't explain why the word quartz came up during a casual conversation and then showed up in a random email about hiking watches. It doesn't explain how it popped up again during a song you'd never heard before. The repetition feels pointed. It feels like the world is talking back, not with full sentences, just with pieces, small mirrors. You think of something obscure. The world repeats it. You hear a word that hasn't meant anything to you before. Then it keeps appearing. It starts to mean something just because it keeps coming back. People don't always tell others about this. It sounds like a stretch. It sounds like superstition. But the feeling is real. The moment you hear a word and then see it again right away isn't just strange. It's precise. You're not reaching. You're not waiting for meaning. It hits you without warning. Sometimes it comes during periods of stress. When your thoughts are racing and your emotions are high, synchronicity becomes more common. You're more aware. Your brain is making faster connections. Your senses feel sharper. You catch things you'd usually miss. But other times it happens when you're calm. You're doing nothing special. You're sipping tea, walking the dog, scrolling through headlines. Then the repetition starts. You might test it. You say a word aloud to yourself, carnelian. Then you watch for it. If it appears again, you feel a rush. If it doesn't, you let it go. But when it does appear, when someone tweets it, or it shows up in a product name, or someone on a podcast mentions it without context, you get that feeling again, that quick pause, that shift inside your chest. You want to write it down, just to prove it happened. You wonder if it's always been like this. If you've always lived in a world that echoed back random words. Maybe you just started listening. Maybe the words were waiting. Maybe they weren't meant for anything, but they found you anyway. You're sitting outside looking up at the sky. It's late afternoon, the sun is low but still bright. The clouds are spread out, light gray, soft edges, nothing out of the ordinary. Then you notice something strange. One of the clouds has a shape that looks like a stretched out fish. You keep staring, and two more clouds nearby look almost exactly the same. Not similar in type, but nearly identical in shape. Same curves, same tail end, same slant. You blink. You look again. They're spaced out evenly, floating like someone copied one and pasted it 3 times across the sky. You don't say anything right away. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe the wind shaped them the same way. But you can't unsee it. You take a photo. You zoom in. The clouds aren't just similar, they're matching. You notice the same curls, the same breaks along the edges. It's like seeing a wallpaper pattern in the clouds. And clouds aren't supposed to do that. This isn't the first time you've noticed something like this. A few weeks ago, you were walking home from work and the sky had a row of long, narrow clouds. Each one had a notch in the middle. They weren't aligned like a normal cloud band. They were separated, same length, same gaps between them, same angle across the horizon. They looked like cutouts, like they were stamped from the same template and dragged into place. You stopped and stared. You even looked around to see if anyone else was noticing. No one was. The sky was doing something odd, and everyone else was just walking by. Most days, the sky feels random. Clouds drift, shapes form and fade. You see faces or animals in them. You know they're just vapor shaped by air currents. But these repeating patterns don't feel like faces or illusions. They don't feel like tricks of the eye. They feel like a glitch, like someone forgot to finish editing the scene. There's a certain kind of cloud that makes this more common. They're called altocumulus clouds. Mid-level, puffy, often seen in groups. On some days they form neat rows across the sky. That's normal. What isn't normal is when the individual clouds start to look exactly the same. Not just similar in size or placement, but in the details. The little bends, the shadows, the rounded tips, all identical. You lie on the grass and stare, counting the copies. 3, 4, 5. It doesn't stop. The entire stretch of sky becomes a loop of the same shape over and over. You try to explain it to someone. You say, "The clouds look like they were duplicated." They ask if you mean symmetrical. You say no. You say identical, as if someone took one photo of a cloud and just pasted it across the sky with slight spacing. You show them a picture. They nod, but they don't feel what you felt. The moment is gone. The pattern in the photo doesn't feel as strange as it did in real life. You wonder if it was just the lighting, but deep down, you remember how precise it was. This happens with line patterns too. You'll see streaks across the sky, thin lines, evenly spaced, stretching from one end to the other. Sometimes they're from planes, contrails, but sometimes they aren't. They appear where there's no traffic. You check an app to see if planes were flying overhead. Nothing. Yet the sky shows these marks, like someone drew across it with a fine white pen, erased part of it, and drew again. The lines don't move. They stay still while other clouds drift. It makes the sky feel flat, like a texture pasted on. You've seen formations that loop too. Clouds that form a curve, then repeat that curve in the same spot 3 or 4 times. You think maybe it's wind. Maybe there's a repeating current in the air that shapes the clouds the same way. That's what meteorologists say. Air layers, humidity levels, rotation. You nod along. It makes sense. But the feeling stays. The sense that something up there copied a shape and didn't bother to hide the copy. On some days, it's the spacing that feels off. You look up and see clouds arranged like dots on a grid. Each one perfectly placed. The distances between them are equal. They're not moving like usual. They hover. You watch for several minutes. Nothing changes. It's like someone paused the sky. You take a video to prove it, but when you play it back, the movement is too slow to notice. You start to doubt yourself. Maybe they were moving. Maybe it just felt frozen. There was a morning once when the sky looked like it had seams. You remember it clearly. You were waiting at the bus stop. The clouds were stretched across the sky like bands, not like natural streaks, but like layers of fabric slightly overlapping. Each band had a soft line, like a crease or fold, and the layers didn't blend. They stopped. They looked drawn on. You told yourself it was just an odd cloud front, but the edges were too clean. You even whispered the word rendered under your breath. Some people say it's all in your head. They say the brain looks for patterns. You see matching clouds because you're tuned into the shapes. You see repetition because you expect it. But this isn't like seeing a rabbit in the clouds. This is precision. This is rows, grids, and copies. Not interpretation, observation. The kind of pattern that makes you check the sky twice. The kind of moment that makes you ask, why does this look too perfect? You don't see these skies every day. But once you do, you look more often. You start noticing small repeats. A triangle of clouds that matches the triangle you saw 2 days ago. A loop that forms again in the same spot above the freeway. A copy of a shape from last week down to the curl on the edge. You check your old photos. You compare. Sometimes it's the same. Sometimes it's close. Close enough to feel like it's not a new sky, but the same one looping back. You keep watching. You keep checking. Not because you expect something big to happen, but because the clouds are starting to look like memory. Like someone pressed repeat. Like the sky forgot how to be random. And now, you're the only one who noticed. You pass a man in a yellow jacket standing at the corner by the fruit stand. He's leaning against the pole, scrolling through his phone. You don't think much of it. You're in a rush. You cross the street, buy a sandwich, and head down 2 blocks toward the train. Then you stop. At the next intersection, you see him again. Same yellow jacket, same haircut, same slouched posture, still on his phone. But there's no way he could have gotten there before you. You haven't seen any taxis. You haven't passed any shortcuts. It took you at least 5 minutes to get here, walking fast. Yet there he is. You slow down. You try to catch his face. It's angled downward, but it looks the same. The build is the same. The posture is identical. You watch for a few more seconds. He pockets his phone and turns away. You don't follow. You just stand there, confused. You go over the route in your head. You check for alternate paths. You replay your steps. There's no answer that makes it feel less strange. This isn't a story about someone dressing alike or looking vaguely similar. This isn't a case of mistaken identity. It's not like seeing a man with the same haircut or a woman wearing a similar jacket. It's seeing the same person in 2 different places with no time in between. A repeat, a copy, a glitch. You might try to forget it. You go about your day, but it happens again. This time, it's a woman with short white hair and red glasses. You see her boarding a bus near your building. An hour later, you're across town, miles away, and she walks past you in the park. She's wearing the same sweater, same glasses, same red shoes. You stop in your tracks. You almost want to laugh. It's not impossible. People take buses, trains, cabs. But what are the odds you'd see the same person, twice, hours apart, both times clearly enough to recognize her? This kind of moment sticks in your brain. You know it can't be real, but you saw it. You trust your memory. You trust your eyes. You're not confused. You're not dreaming. You didn't imagine the yellow jacket. You didn't create the red glasses. You saw them, clearly, twice. Some people experience this more than once. You might live in a big city where you see thousands of faces every day. You assume repetition is rare, but then it happens again. A man in a brown coat with a limp crosses your path outside a bookstore. Later that evening, you see the same man walking past a restaurant 10 blocks away. Same gait, same coat. He doesn't see you. But you notice him. You notice because your brain already filed him under distinct. He doesn't match the crowd. He stands out. And now he's here again. You try to explain it. Maybe he walked, maybe he drove, maybe it's his twin. But the more you think about it, the less it adds up. These people don't seem in a rush. They don't act like they've been moving fast. They appear relaxed. Still scrolling their phones, still walking at the same pace. You don't see sweat or urgency. You just see them. Again, there's also the stranger version, the one where someone passes you and then passes you again. You walk past a man on the bridge. He's carrying a brown paper bag, looking straight ahead. You keep going, turn left, and take a shortcut through a narrow alley. 2 minutes later, you're on a different street, and he's walking toward you again. Same bag, same expression, same everything. But there's no way he could have circled around and ended up in front of you. You were walking the whole time. You didn't stop. You didn't turn around. Yet he's there, moving toward you like nothing happened. You feel your stomach drop. You start to question everything. Did you miss something? Was there a mirror you didn't see? Was it a reflection? But the sidewalk is solid. There are no tricks, no glass, no turns you missed. You know what you saw. You replay it again and again. Some people report even stranger patterns. They say they see the same stranger in different cities. You travel from one place to another, and you see a woman with silver earrings and a green scarf in both locations, days apart, hundreds of miles away. Not someone you know, not someone famous, just a random face that keeps showing up. You shrug it off the first time, but then it happens again and again. You stop believing it's coincidence. It starts to feel like repetition, like a background character in a simulation, like the world has a limit on the number of faces it uses. You might tell someone about it. They say you're just noticing things more, that your brain is trained to pick out details now. Maybe that's true. Maybe your brain holds on to shapes and colors and uses them to connect people who aren't actually the same. But it doesn't feel like that. You weren't looking for these people. You weren't scanning for duplicates. You were just walking, just living. And then it happened. There's something about how people walk, how they carry weight, how they hold their phones, how they tilt their heads. That's harder to fake. You see someone with the same face, maybe it's a lookalike. But when they also move the same way, at the same speed, with the same rhythm, it feels less like chance and more like a replay. You start to watch the street differently. You check faces more often. You look twice when someone passes. You try not to stare, but you compare. You keep a mental list. Red jacket, headphones, limp on left leg. Later, you check again. Was that the same red jacket from earlier? Were the shoes the same? Was the gait identical? Sometimes you decide it wasn't the same person. You feel relieved, but sometimes it matches too well. You think about how many people live in your city. Thousands, millions. What are the odds that the same person keeps passing you with the same clothes, same pace, same posture? You don't have the math for it. You just have the moment, the repeat, the glitch. You remember the man in the yellow jacket long after you forget what you were doing that day. Not because he said anything, not because he stood out in any dramatic way, but because he shouldn't have been in both places. You saw him once. That made sense. The second time didn't. And now that moment is stored, like a mental snapshot, reminding you that even the most basic parts of reality sometimes double back on themselves. You're sitting in a cafe by the window. Outside, people pass by, their reflections caught in the glass. You look up, and in the window you see the person behind you. That makes sense. Then you shift slightly and catch your own face in the reflection of their sunglasses. That reflection is expected too. But then inside the reflection of their sunglasses, you see another reflection, one that includes the cafe window and part of the room behind you. You lean in, trying to understand what you're looking at. The layers don't stop. You see yourself, then a version of yourself behind that, then another. The reflections stretch inward, like looking down a hallway made of mirrors, but there's no mirror behind you. Just a wall. You blink. You look again. The reflection is still there. It didn't vanish when you moved. You hold still, trying to map the angles in your mind. There's the window, there's the glasses, there's your face. But there shouldn't be a third or fourth image of your face tucked deeper inside. There's no second mirror to bounce it back again. You look around for glass panels or chrome surfaces. Nothing explains it. The angle's too tight, the distance is too short, the repeat is too clear. This is what people sometimes call an infinite mirror moment. It's when a reflection shows more depth than should be possible. Not just one bounce, but multiple. Not just you and your surroundings, but a sequence of yourself repeating deeper into a space that physically ends. These aren't moments that you expect. They catch you off guard. They happen in sunglasses, in windows, in polished metal. They happen while you're just living. You look up, and suddenly the world has copied itself several times over. You might have seen something similar as a kid, standing between two mirrors and watching your image stretch back into infinity. That setup makes sense. One mirror reflects the other. The loop continues until light can't bounce anymore. But that's not what's happening here. You're not between two mirrors. You're standing next to a bus window, and suddenly you see yourself, not once, but 4 or 5 times, folded back into a reflection of a reflection of a reflection. You try to line it up in your mind. You can't. The geometry doesn't work. The reflections appear from angles that should be blocked. There are moments when it's subtle. You're walking past a shop window. Inside, there's a mirror angled just enough to catch the reflection of the window behind you. That window reflects another mirror, which reflects you. You keep walking. As you pass, your image flashes 2 or 3 times in a row. Not in a glitchy way, just in a pattern that feels too stacked. You pause and walk backward, trying to repeat it. The reflections don't show up the same way. Now you only see one version of yourself. Whatever chain of reflections was there a second ago is gone. Other times it's more obvious. You're in an elevator with polished walls. You look into one panel and see yourself. Then you tilt your head and see another you, slightly smaller, just behind. And another one after that. You look for the second mirror. You don't find one. The angle of the panel curves slightly, but there's nothing to bounce the light more than once. Yet the image of you continues, not faded, not distorted, just repeated, clean and sharp, as if the space behind you extended longer than the elevator could possibly allow. There's something about sunglasses that makes this effect more unsettling. Someone sitting across from you wearing reflective lenses. You catch your reflection in them. That's expected. But then you notice a second face behind yours, and a third. You count them, 3 versions of you stacked behind the real one. You try to find the source. The only glass behind you is the cafe window. There's no mirror, no back wall made of chrome. But the faces are there, clearly visible, repeating deeper than physics allows. You might take a photo trying to freeze it. But the image on your screen doesn't capture the same depth. It looks flat. Only 1 or 2 reflections show up. You try a video, slowly tilting your head, but the strange depth doesn't translate. You lower the camera. You look with your eyes again. There it is, the cascade of reflections you can't explain. You don't know if it's lighting, angles, or something else entirely. You just know what you saw. Sometimes it's not your face that repeats. Sometimes it's objects. A cup sitting on a table. You glance at a spoon next to it and see the reflection of the cup. But the reflection shows not just the cup, it shows the cup and another spoon and another cup. The sequence loops 2 or 3 times inside the curved metal. You lift the spoon to test it. You tilt it. The reflections shift, but they're still layered. You can't trace the path. The angles are too sharp. The distance between the cup and the spoon doesn't allow for more than 1 bounce. Yet there they are, 3 cups inside the spoon. You've probably looked into a computer screen or turned toward a bus window and noticed reflections layered over each other. That's normal. Glass reflects differently depending on lighting and angle, but in an infinite mirror moment, the layers don't blur. They align. They stack. They keep going. You feel like you could step into them. Not because they're vivid, but because they're precise. They follow rules, just not ones that fit the room you're in. You might tell someone about it. They say it's just a trick of the eye. They say it's internal reflection, a play of light bouncing inside a layer of glass. That makes sense on paper, but it doesn't explain how the reflections stayed sharp, how they appeared in spaces where no second mirror existed, how you saw yourself from behind when the only reflective surface was in front of you. The feeling is subtle. It doesn't frighten you. It just stays in your mind. You remember how the images echoed, how your face appeared once, then again, then again. Each one slightly smaller, each one clear, each one reaching further into a space that didn't exist. You keep looking into glass now, into sunglasses, into elevator panels, into spoons. You're not trying to see yourself. You're watching for the repeats. The moments when the mirror doesn't just show you, but shows too many versions. More than should be there. Too many to be explained away. You're in the kitchen. The sun is pouring through the windows. You're making tea. The yard outside is dry. No wind, no clouds, just still afternoon light. Then something catches your attention. A sound, faint but real. You open the door and step outside. The air smells different. You hear rain. You walk onto the patio, and sure enough, it's wet. Not just damp, raining. Light drops falling straight down. But here's the thing. It's only raining in your backyard. You look up. The sky is blue. Not a cloud in sight. You walk to the fence and peer over. The neighbor's yard is dry. The road behind your house? Dry. You take a step back into your own grass, and the drops are still falling. You hold out your hand. Water hits your palm. You're not imagining it. It's real, but it shouldn't be happening. This kind of moment doesn't make sense. Rain comes from clouds. Clouds cover areas. Rain spreads across blocks, towns, even cities. That's how you've always experienced it. When it rains, everyone knows it. Everyone gets wet. But this is different. This is a weather shift that doesn't follow the rules. It doesn't spread. It doesn't build. It just appears in one place and only one. You might take a video. You show the raindrops hitting the patio while the sky above is bright and still. You pan left, dry. Pan right, dry. Straight ahead, past your fence, there's not even a puddle. Just your lawn, your chairs, and the strange sound of falling water. You check your sprinkler system. It's off. You check your roof. No runoff. There's no explanation. It's not leaking. It's not wind-blown mist. It's rain. Real, steady, ground-wetting rain. Then it stops. Just as quickly as it began, the sound fades. The drops lighten. In less than a minute, it's gone. You walk through the grass. The ground is wet, not soaked. The kind of wet that comes from a short, soft shower. The scent of rain still hangs in the air. You turn around and walk back inside, feeling like you just stepped out of a different place. Later, you tell someone. They nod politely. They ask if it was maybe a neighbor's hose or if someone was washing their car. You say no. It wasn't spray. It fell from above, straight down. The kind of rain you can feel on your shoulders and neck. Not a mist, not a trick. A patch of real rain, in one yard, under a clear sky. This happens more often than people realize. There are reports of isolated rain, sometimes only over a driveway, sometimes on a stretch of one road, while the rest stays bone dry. A delivery driver might say they passed through rain for just 10 seconds before the road was clear again. They check the rearview mirror and see the same sunny stretch behind them. No dark clouds, no buildup, just a moment of water from nowhere. It's not just rain. Sometimes it's wind. You're standing on a porch and suddenly a strong gust hits your face. The trees sway, dust kicks up. You walk 10 steps forward and the air is still. No wind, no movement. You walk back and the gust returns. You feel like you're caught inside a narrow band of weather, like the atmosphere has been sliced and rearranged in layers that don't blend. People working outdoors, farmers, landscapers, runners, sometimes talk about these shifts. One field gets soaked, the next stays dry. A storm rolls over half a neighborhood, then stops right at the fence line, not gradually, not with a fading edge, with a hard line. You can stand with one foot in dry dirt and one foot in mud. In some cases, the line is even sharper. Someone stands under a light drizzle, takes a step forward, and is dry again. The air feels different on either side. One side smells of wet leaves, the other smells of dust and grass. It's not a matter of moving clouds or advancing weather. It's a bubble. A local pocket of rain that begins and ends with no warning. Weather science has a few names for this. Microbursts, localized cells, evaporative downbursts. All are real. All describe how small changes in temperature, pressure, and wind can cause narrow patches of rain to form and drop, sometimes in areas as small as a single backyard. These things happen fast and vanish just as fast. By the time radar detects them, they're gone. But knowing the name doesn't change how it feels. It doesn't feel like weather. It feels like a glitch. Like someone tested a weather effect in just one part of the map and forgot to turn it off. You watch the trees in your yard sway underwater while the rest of the street stays still. You look up and see nothing, not even a trace of cloud. You open the weather app and it says clear skies, 0% chance of rain. You try to move on, but the next day you check the sky more often. You watch the light. You study the breeze. You wonder if it will happen again. You walk into the yard and listen. No sound, no drops, stillness. You think maybe it was just a one-time thing. Then days later, you step outside and hear it again. Soft, distant, a light whisper. Rain in the roses, rain in the center of the grass. Not the whole yard, just a patch. You hold out your hand, it finds you again. You stand still, and this time you don't try to explain it. You just feel it. A private moment of weather, yours alone, unfolding for no one else. You're sitting on a bench at the edge of a plaza. People walk past, alone or in pairs, sipping drinks, carrying bags, checking phones. The usual noise surrounds you. Traffic, footsteps, snippets of conversation. You're not paying attention to anything in particular. Then something catches your eye. A man in a gray hoodie walks past. He He looks down at his phone, nods to himself, then disappears into the crowd. A minute later, he passes again. Same hoodie, same nod, same pace. You sit up. You watch him go. He turns the same way at the corner. Another minute passes. He comes back again. It's not just similar clothing or a familiar face. It's the same person. He does the same exact motion every time. Phone in hand, head down, one nod, then a left turn. You check your surroundings. It's not a looped path. There's no small circular walkway. He's walking in full-length laps around a public area and returning with the same gesture. You look at others. No one else seems to notice. They keep walking. You try to track him again, this time from the side. He passes. Then he passes again. Same rhythm. Same pause at the trash bin. Same glance at the crosswalk. You've seen this exact sequence before. Twice, maybe 3 times now. You start to scan the area. A woman near the fountain is taking selfies. You think nothing of it. Then you notice she lifts her phone, turns her head slightly to the right, and smiles. 10 seconds later, she does it again. Same angle, same motion. Again and again. There's no variation. Not in her posture, not in her facial expression. Just a repeat of the same motion every 15 seconds. You wonder if she's recording a looping video, but she's holding her phone upright, tapping the screen like she's taking separate shots. You think, maybe it's habit. Maybe she's trying to get a perfect photo. That makes sense, but after a full minute, nothing changes. Same movement, same angle, same pause after each tap. You feel a small tension in your chest. It's not fear, it's unease. You're watching a person perform a routine like a background animation. This isn't about noticing patterns in busy places. This isn't like watching people jog the same track or seeing a delivery person circle a block. This is about moments that feel too exact, too repeated. You're watching people in public spaces act like they're stuck in a loop. Their movements don't look natural. They look copied, like you've seen them before. And not just once. You go to a grocery store. You stand near the fruit section, looking at bananas. A woman walks past with a green basket, glances at the apples, picks one up, puts it down, then walks away. You turn back to your list. Then you hear the same footsteps. You look up, she passes again. Same green basket, same glance at the apples, same pause, same movement. She picks one up, puts it down, walks away. You stare at the aisle. You expect her to circle back again. She does. You don't know what to do. You try not to stare. You don't want to draw attention. But now you're watching more closely. You notice a man standing near the canned goods. He's holding a shopping list. He doesn't read it. He doesn't move. Every 30 seconds, he shifts his weight from left to right. He scratches his chin, then stillness, then repeats. You stand in a different aisle. You wait. A few minutes pass. You return. He's still there, still scratching, still shifting, still holding the list, but never reading it. At a train station, you notice a girl pacing. She walks from one pillar to another, pauses, looks at her phone, turns, and walks back. You figure she's waiting, but 20 minutes go by. She repeats the path with the same turn every time. Not a bored wander, not a varied pace, same number of steps, same head tilt, same look at the phone. You time it. She turns after exactly 15 seconds every loop. You wonder if you're imagining it, but you know what you saw. You didn't just notice movement. You noticed repetition. Not rhythm, repetition. Like characters in a video game, when you stop moving and they idle, their hands move, their heads turn, but the motion never changes. That's what this looks like. People in idle states, background loops. At a library, a man flips through a book but never turns the page. His thumb moves slightly, as if about to turn it. Then it doesn't. A few seconds later, the same motion. You think maybe he's scanning a paragraph, but it happens again. Same half turn, then nothing. He's not reading, he's repeating. You keep seeing it, not every day, not every place, but enough. You start to wonder if these are just unnoticed habits, people caught in small behavioral loops. But they're too clean, too even, too unbroken. It's not like someone fidgeting. Fidgeting changes. These motions don't. They feel like they're on rails, like their motion has been pre-written and now they're stuck in it. You try to explain it. Maybe these people are lost in thought. Maybe they're anxious. Maybe they're practicing for something. But those explanations don't match what you saw. You didn't see someone trying to choose an apple. You saw someone pick up the same apple at the same angle, with the same pause, multiple times in a row. You remember that one guy in the plaza with the hoodie, how he nodded every time he passed the same tree. You think about the selfie woman and her exact posture. You remember the scratch of the man's chin in the grocery store. And now, when you sit in public spaces, you start watching more. You wait to see if someone will loop. You don't want them to, but part of you expects it now. And when it happens, when the gesture repeats, when the footsteps return, when the face reappears, you sit very still and say nothing. Because now you know what to look for. You know how to spot background characters. You're lying in bed, it's late, the lights are off, the house is quiet. You close your eyes, start to drift off, then pause. You hear something. Faint, distant. It sounds like music, soft, maybe a piano or a slow guitar. You lift your head and listen harder. The sound is barely there, but it's real enough to make you focus. You sit up. The house is still silent. No TV, no speakers. You check your phone. Nothing is playing. You open the window. The street is quiet, but the music keeps going. Not loud, not sharp, just quiet enough to make you wonder if it's real. You might think it's coming from outside. Maybe a neighbor left a radio on. Maybe there's a car parked somewhere with music drifting through the air. You step out of bed and walk to each window. You press your ear against the wall. No change, no clear source. The moment feels strange, not scary, just odd. You can't explain it. You can't even hum the tune, but something was playing. This happens to a lot of people. You're in the shower and hear a faint melody under the sound of running water. You pause. The melody fades. You think maybe the pipes are humming. Maybe it's just noise. But the tone had rhythm. It had shape. It sounded like a song. You turn the water off and stand there in silence. Nothing. You turn it back on. The music returns. You might hear it through a fan, or the buzz of a refrigerator, or the background hum of traffic outside. You're not imagining the sound. You're not hallucinating in the classic sense. Your ears are picking up a mix of tones. Your brain is interpreting them as music. It's called auditory pareidolia. Just like your brain sees faces in clouds or animals in tree bark, it hears patterns in sound that don't come from a song. The tones combine in ways that resemble music. The brain fills in the rest. Sometimes it's clearer than that. You're working in a quiet room and suddenly hear a faint radio. It's coming from somewhere behind the wall or the ceiling. It sounds like someone left a speaker on in another room. You walk around, trying to find it. The sound seems to move. You think it's coming from above you, then from behind a closed door. But every room is empty. You even unplug the Wi-Fi router. You switch off your phone. You turn off everything. But the music keeps playing. You can't tell what the song is. The vocals are unclear. It's too soft to understand the lyrics. You might catch a single word, a repeated beat, a high note that seems familiar. You strain to recognize it, but it slips away. You're left with a faint echo of a tune you can't place. You might stand still, try to record it. You play back the recording. All you hear is background noise. The music doesn't show up. In some cases, the sound isn't music. It's voices. Not clear speech, just the cadence of a conversation. A rise and fall of tone. It feels like people talking just behind a wall. You can't make out the words, but the rhythm sounds human. You check the hallway, you check the vents. No one's there. No radio, no television, no people. Just the hum of a machine, or nothing at all. This is different from imagining a song in your head. Everyone gets songs stuck in their mind. That's called an earworm. It's internal. You know it's not real. You're replaying a song from memory, but the music you're hearing now feels external. You didn't choose it. You didn't start it. You just noticed it. That's what makes it feel different. You don't always hear full songs. Sometimes it's a single chord, repeating, a loop of 3 or 4 notes, a soft beat, a distant melody with no clear start or end. It might last 10 seconds or 2 minutes, then it fades. You question yourself. Did that just happen? You walk into the next room and listen again. Nothing. It's gone. Some people hear these sounds more often when they're falling asleep. You're half awake, floating in the space between sleep and thought. That's when your brain is most suggestible. A ceiling fan hums, a car rumbles past, and from that noise, your brain builds a tune. You sit up and listen. You swear it sounded like a violin or a piano loop, but when you focus, the sound dissolves. Other people hear it during stress. You're tired, overworked, you haven't rested enough. You finally sit down in a quiet room and start to relax. That's when you hear it. a soft melody, like elevator music. You pause what you're doing, you wait, it fades. It was never loud, but it was there. Your body is still, the room is still, but your ears pick up more than silence. There are technical reasons this happens. Machines make sound. Fans, heaters, fridges, computers all create vibrations. When those vibrations blend in just the right way, they form harmonics. The brain likes patterns. It tries to organize the noise into something meaningful. Music is one of the most recognizable patterns we know, so we hear music, even if it's not there. But sometimes there's no noise at all. You're out in nature, no traffic, no machines, just a breeze and some distant birds, and still you hear it. A tune as soft as a whisper. As soon as you notice it, it shifts, it fades. You try to listen again. Nothing. The sound was clean, but it had no source. You wonder if you're the only one. You ask someone nearby if they hear anything. They don't. You check the radio. It's off. You hold your phone to your ear. No sound. You press your ear against the wall. Still nothing. But you heard it. You know you did. You try not to think about it too much. You go back to what you were doing. But part of you stays alert. You wait to hear it again. Sometimes, the same tune returns. A few notes you recognize from earlier in the week. You think, maybe it's something I heard years ago. Maybe it's a childhood song, a theme from a show. You can't place it, but it feels familiar. You hum a few bars, then forget it again. This experience doesn't feel dramatic. It's quiet. It doesn't shout. It arrives slowly. You could ignore it if you wanted to. But when you listen, you hear it clearly, just for a moment. Then it disappears, as if it was never there at all. You're walking home as the sun begins to set. The light is sharp and angled low. Everything stretches. Buildings, trees, parked cars. Your own shadow follows you, long and clear across the pavement. You stop for a second to check your phone. The wind picks up. You feel it pass. The street is quiet. Then you look down, and your shadow shifts. You didn't move. You're sure of that. You stood still. But your shadow didn't. It twitched, not because of wind or shifting light. It moved on its own. A small step forward, a tilt to the side. Then it freezes again. You stand there, motionless. You watch it. Nothing happens. Then you move your arm, just to test it. The shadow follows as it should. You drop your arm. The shadow returns to normal. But what you just saw doesn't leave your mind. You remember clearly. The shadow moved first. It's not something you expect. Your shadow is supposed to be tied to you, a direct copy of your shape. You move, it moves. You stop, it stops. It doesn't think, it doesn't delay. But now something's different. The link feels loose, like the shadow lagged, or worse, acted on its own. You keep walking. The moment fades. You pass a low wall, and your shadow climbs up it as you move past. Everything works again. The angles shift, the length changes. That's how shadows are supposed to behave. But then you turn the corner, and under the street lamp, you notice something else. Your shadow flickers for a second, like it's not sure where to land. It stretches one way, then jerks back. You didn't move. The light above you didn't change. But your shadow stuttered, like a skipped frame. That's when it starts to feel like a glitch. Not a visual illusion, not a trick of sunlight, but a moment where the rules faltered. You turn in place slowly. Your shadow turns too, but now you're watching more closely. You're not just checking for shape, you're checking for lag, for desync, for signs that the mirror under your feet isn't as reliable as it once was. You walk into your apartment and close the door. The hallway is dim, lit by a single bulb overhead. As you walk past, your shadow falls onto the wall beside you. You stop again. Your body halts, but your shadow seems to take one more step, a half step forward, then it snaps back. You breathe out, unsure if your eyes are just tired. You wave your hand quickly. The shadow keeps up. You repeat the motion. It's fine now, but you saw it. That small delay, that slip. Later, you sit at your desk. A lamp is on to your left. Your arm rests still on the surface, but out of the corner of your eye, you see your hand's shadow shift slightly. You turn to look. The hand didn't move, but the shape on the wall did. You stare at the surface. The shadow stays still again. You shift your chair. You try to recreate the motion. Nothing happens. But the earlier movement was real. You check for flickering light. You wave your hand to check how fast the shadow responds. It's instant, as it should be. But you know what you saw wasn't imagined. It wasn't a trick of the lamp. It was a delay, a sliver of time where the shadow acted out of step. Some people say they've seen the opposite. They move, but the shadow doesn't follow. They lift an arm, but the shadow stays still for a moment. Then it jumps into place. It's rare, but once it happens, they start noticing other things. A slight curve in the shadow that wasn't there before. A head tilt that doesn't match. A pause where the shadow hesitates before catching up. Others describe walking on a sunny day and seeing two shadows, one crisp and dark as expected, another faint double just behind or beside it, not caused by a second light source. No reflective surface nearby, just a duplicate, a faint echo of the real thing. They move their arms. The main shadow follows. The echo twitches a second late, not quite aligned. A glitch. You might try to record it. You take out your phone. You aim it at your feet or your wall, but the moment's passed. Your shadow behaves. The sync returns. You check the footage. Everything is normal, but you remember how it looked, off by just enough to feel wrong. You walk into a parking lot lit by overhead lamps. The light falls in narrow cones. You step into one and watch your shadow fall in front of you. But the shape is strange. Elongated, yes, but also warped. The legs bend differently. The head is tilted even though yours is straight. You tilt your head slowly. The shadow doesn't move. Then it does, but not the way you tilted. It twists instead, just slightly, then resets. You try again, same delay, same warped motion. You stare at the ground, confused. You turn slowly in place, watching the shadow spin with you. But the motion feels rubbery, not smooth. It's like the shape beneath you is trying to match your motion, but keeps falling short. You leave the light, step into the dark, then back into the light. The shadow reforms. This time it follows better, but the earlier motion stays in your mind. There are theories for this: flickering bulbs, hidden reflections, multiple overlapping light sources. Each one could cause your shadow to stretch or double briefly. But these explanations don't cover everything. Not the movements that happen when no light shifts, not the delay when everything else is still, not the moments when you're motionless and the shadow moves anyway. People rarely talk about it. It sounds like a hallucination, like a tired brain playing tricks. But those who've seen it remember it clearly. The pause, the flicker, the disconnect, the feeling that the dark shape you've trusted to follow you might not be as attached as you thought. You walk past a glass window at night. You see your reflection. You see your shadow behind it. For one split second, your shadow's head turns faster than yours. You freeze. You test again. No change, but your heart skips. You know you saw it. And once you've seen it, you can't forget. The thing that moves with you isn't always as steady as it seems. You drop your keys. They slip from your hand, clink against your knuckles, and fall toward the floor. But in that instant, between letting go and hearing the sound of metal on tile, something feels off. It seems like they didn't fall quite right, like they paused in the air for a split second too long, just hanging there, weightless. You blink. The keys are already on the ground, but that moment sticks in your head. You replay it. You remember the fall, but it feels stretched, like gravity hesitated. You pick them up and shake it off. Maybe your hand motion confused your sense of timing. Maybe your brain was distracted. But a few days later, it happens again, this time with a pen. You drop it from your desk. It slips between your fingers and falls. But halfway down, it feels like it hovers, just for a breath before finishing the drop. You don't say anything, but you notice. It doesn't happen every time. You've dropped things your whole life. But once you start noticing these moments, they become harder to ignore. You open a cabinet, knock over a plastic container, and as it falls, it seems to glide for longer than it should. You expect a fast drop, a direct path to the ground, but instead, it lingers midair, almost like the motion paused, then resumed. The sound comes late, not because the object took longer to fall, but because your sense of the fall shifted. These aren't illusions in the traditional sense. You know what you saw. You're not misjudging height or distance. You saw the object fall. You saw the speed. You just remember it floating for longer than it should have, like something slowed it down. There's a strange feeling attached to it. Not shock, not confusion, just a brief gap in reality. You expect cause and effect. Object drops, object hits ground. But this moment interrupts that line. It's as if the object passed through a slower version of space, then picked up speed again. You try to describe it to someone, and they nod politely. They say maybe it was your perspective. Maybe it bounced off the air. You let it go, but the moment stays with you. It can happen with light things, receipts, leaves, socks. You drop a receipt while sorting papers. It drifts. That makes sense. But at one point in its fall, it stops fluttering. It hovers, not because of air resistance. It just holds position. Then it resumes, fluttering again. You lean over, pick it up, and think, that shouldn't have looked like that. Other times it's heavier, a small book, a bottle cap, a phone. You drop it by accident. The fall looks normal at first, but somewhere between your hand and the floor, it slows down. You know gravity didn't change. You know the air didn't thicken, but your eyes tell a different story. The fall had a pause in it, a space, a delay. You start to test it. You drop a pen again, you watch it, you drop a spoon, you drop a deck of cards. Most of the time, they fall as expected, fast, direct. But every now and then, the strange pause returns, just for a fraction of a second. The object doesn't float in the full sense. It doesn't hover like it's defying physics, but it feels like it's stalled. Like someone pressed a single frame of the fall and held it before letting it finish. This gets stranger when it happens with small bounces. You drop a ball of paper. It hits the table, pops up slightly, and lands again. But during that tiny upward motion, the ball seems to freeze in midair. You expect a fast bounce, a blink and you miss it moment. But instead, your eyes lock onto that mid-bounce pause. It hovers at the peak longer than it should, then falls. You look at the clock, check your hands, test your eyes. You wonder if you blinked or flinched. But everything else was normal. Only the fall felt strange. You check the surface. You drop the paper again. The bounce is quick, ordinary. You try to recreate the moment. You can't. Some people describe this feeling with electronics. You drop a phone or a remote. It slips, flips once, and in mid-flip, it seems to stop rotating for just a beat. Then it resumes. You don't drop it on purpose, so you only catch it once. But the memory is strong. The flip paused. The phone hung in space longer than it should have. You might tell yourself that your brain misjudged the timing. Maybe it stretched the moment because you were focused. That's possible. When your attention locks in, time can feel slower. It's like how things move in slow motion during accidents. But this is different. These are small, ordinary moments. You weren't scared. You weren't bracing for impact. You were just watching something fall, and the fall glitched. It's not dramatic. The object doesn't hover for seconds. It doesn't levitate or fly. It just breaks the rhythm. That's all. The movement starts, then pauses, then finishes. That pause is what stands out. Not long enough to shock you, just long enough to register as wrong. You start to remember other moments. A butter knife falling in the kitchen, a coin slipping off a desk, a tea bag dropped into a mug. Each one had a moment, barely a second, where the fall looked off, slowed, dragged. You wonder if it's always been this way and you only just started noticing. You don't bring it up much. When you do, people say maybe the object caught on air, maybe it brushed against your sleeve, maybe your depth perception glitched, but that doesn't match what you remember. You remember the object floating, just briefly, a silent pause inside a very loud law of physics. You don't fear it, but it changes the way you watch things fall. You pay more attention now. You don't just look, you track. You want to see it again, not to prove anything, just to catch the moment when gravity, for a fraction of a second, forgets to pull. You're sitting at your desk, focused on a task. The room is quiet. The windows are shut. There's no food around, no candles, nothing scented. Then you smell something, a soft whiff of perfume, floral, maybe a little powdery. It's faint, but sharp enough to stop what you're doing. You look around, no one's nearby. You sniff the air again. It's still there just for a second. Then it fades. You lean toward the door, check the hallway. Nothing. You walk around the room. The smell is gone. You try to explain it. Maybe it drifted in from outside. Maybe it came from your clothes. But the window is closed. No breeze. You didn't put on anything scented today. You check your hands, your chair, the desk. Nothing smells like perfume. Still, you know what you smelled. It wasn't your imagination. This happens more than most people admit. You're in the shower, washing your hair, and suddenly you smell cigarette smoke. It's strong, like someone just lit one nearby. You stop and check the vent. You lean your head out of the curtain. The house is empty. The smell fades quickly, but it was there. Not vague, not subtle. You smelled smoke where no one had been smoking. Sometimes it's food. You're walking down the stairs and you catch the scent of toast. Not just a generic warm smell, but actual toast, bread, heat, slight char. You pause and sniff again. It's gone. You check the kitchen. The toaster is unplugged. No one's cooked anything. The smell isn't coming from outside. It's not a neighbor's breakfast. It was inside the house, just for a second, and now it's gone. You start to think back. This isn't the first time. You've smelled rain on a dry day, wood smoke with no fire, fresh paint in an empty building. The scent comes out of nowhere. It's specific, familiar, and completely disconnected from the moment you're in. You try to ignore it, but it sticks in your head. It felt real. Some people say it's just memory, that the brain can replay smells the same way it replays songs or images. That might be true, but these smells don't feel like memories. They feel physical. They don't come from thought. They hit your nose like something is actually in the air. Others suggest it's sensitivity. Maybe your nose is picking up trace amounts of chemicals or odors from distant places, an open window 3 floors down, a vent that connects across apartments, a hallway someone just walked through. Maybe. But these explanations fall short when the smells are too sharp or don't match anything around you. You're walking down a quiet street and you smell bacon. Not the idea of bacon, the exact scent of it frying in a pan. But there's no diner nearby, no open windows. You pause and turn in a circle, trying to find the source. Nothing, no smoke, no people. You keep walking. The smell doesn't return. Other times it's perfume again. You're alone in a bookstore. You smell lilac. You know the scent. You grew up around it, but no one near you is wearing it. You check the shelves. No potpourri, no candles. You sniff your sleeves, your bag. Nothing. But you smelled it. Strong. For just a moment, and then it disappeared like it never happened. There are moments when the smell is connected to someone who isn't there. You're sitting in your car, the engine is off, you're thinking about a person you miss, then you smell them, their shampoo, their cologne, a scent that's tied to them so closely it makes your eyes sting. You breathe in again. It's gone. You open the window, you check your seat, you say nothing, but the feeling stays. Sometimes it happens in a new place. You walk into a room you've never been in before, and you're hit with a smell. Old paper, cigar smoke, oranges. Something distinct but out of place. No one else mentions it. You stand still for a moment, trying to figure out what could be causing it. You even press your nose to the furniture. Nothing. But the smell was there when you walked in. It met you at the door. For some people, the smell returns over and over. It's not a memory, it's not a ghost, it's not tied to any product or object, it's just there, at random times, in random places. It might be roses, it might be bleach, it might be burning sugar. It shows up for a minute, then vanishes like smoke in the wind. This can be comforting, but it can also be unsettling, especially when the smell reminds you of something bad. You're in bed, trying to fall asleep, and you suddenly smell burnt plastic. You get up, check the outlets, the appliances, everything. Nothing's wrong. The smell fades. You lie back down, but now you're alert. You double-check the stove, the sockets, the power strips, all normal. You go back to bed, but you leave the light on. Other times, it's not fear, it's confusion. The smell doesn't belong. You're in a dentist's waiting room and you smell cinnamon rolls. Not a whiff, an actual rich scent. You turn to look for a box of pastries. There's nothing, just magazines and potted plants. The scent disappears after a few seconds, and no one else reacts. You're left wondering if anyone else noticed. You might try to log it. You write it down each time it happens. You note the time, the place, the scent, the mood you were in. Patterns don't always emerge. Sometimes it's tied to memories. Sometimes it's random. You check the room again. Nothing ever smells like that when you go back later. The moment doesn't repeat. And yet, the smell was real. You remember it clearly. Not a vague sense, a precise experience. Just like a sound or a face or a sudden temperature change. It came from nowhere, then disappeared. It left you with a question you can't answer. And once it happens, you start paying closer attention to the air around you. Not just the room, but the space between. The invisible place where the next unexplainable scent might drift through. Just long enough to remind you that not everything in your world can be traced back to something solid. You're standing in the kitchen with a friend. They're telling a story about their trip to the mountains. They mention something about the lodge being snow-gripped. You nod. It makes sense. Snow-gripped, covered in snow, slippery, locked in, surrounded. You get the image. Then they pause. Wait, they say. That's not a real word, is it? You think about it. It sounded real. It fit the sentence. But no, you've never heard it before. You realize your brain accepted it without hesitation. It worked. Until someone questioned it. This is what people call a word glitch. Someone says a word that doesn't exist, but in the moment, it sounds like it does. Not a mispronunciation. Not a joke. A word that lands so naturally you don't even notice it's wrong. It carries meaning. It fits the tone and rhythm of the sentence. It doesn't break the flow. Your brain absorbs it like it's always been there. You're in a meeting. A coworker is giving a presentation. They say, "We're aiming for more strivity across the departments." You nod. Strivity, a blend of strategy and creativity, or maybe streamlined activity. You're not sure, but your mind builds a definition. It makes sense. You keep listening. A few minutes later, your coworker repeats the word, and someone finally asks, "What does strivity mean?" There's a pause. The presenter frowns and says, "I think I made that up." The room laughs, but the point stands. Everyone understood it. No one stopped to question it the first time. Sometimes the glitch is more subtle. You're in line at a coffee shop. The person ahead of you says, "Can I get a slatticino?" The barista pauses, confused. The person blinks. "Sorry, I meant flat white." You hear the words again in your head. Slatticino. It's nonsense, but it's shaped like a real drink. Your brain heard the rhythm, the suffix, the tone. It passed your mental filter. You didn't flag it as wrong. Until the speaker corrected themselves, you were ready to believe it was just a drink you hadn't tried yet. These moments don't happen all the time, but when they do, they stand out. Not because they're dramatic, because they show how flexible your brain is. Language is pattern-based. You learn rules, prefixes, suffixes, tone. So when someone bends a rule or invents one, you don't always notice. You fill in the gap automatically. Kids do this all the time. A child says, "He unbigged the tower," after knocking over some blocks. You smile. You know what they meant. They undid it. They made it small. The word isn't real, but it doesn't matter. The meaning is clear. Children build language from parts. They stack familiar sounds to make new ones. Adults mostly outgrow that habit, but not completely. In casual speech, you still invent. You say things like techie or vibey or hangry, and most people accept them without a second thought. Some of those words eventually become real through repetition. But a word glitch isn't just slang. It's a one-time word, a blend or misfire that lands perfectly. It feels familiar, even though it has no history. You're having lunch with a friend. They're frustrated about something and say, "The whole situation is just so flumbly." You nod. You get it. Messy, uncertain, awkward, flumbly. It's not in the dictionary. But the sound tells you enough. You don't question it. You use it 5 minutes later without even thinking. Sometimes the glitch isn't even noticed until later. You're replaying a conversation in your head. A phrase catches your attention. You realize the person used a word that doesn't exist, but in the moment, it passed. You accepted it because the structure was right. The syllables matched. The emotion behind it was clear. It's only with distance that the mismatch becomes visible. There's a difference between these glitches and made-up jargon. Jargon is deliberate. Word glitches feel accidental. They're not coined for style or cleverness. They slip out in normal speech. They arrive naturally. That's why they feel so eerie when you notice them. Your brain didn't flag the error. It worked with it. It built meaning around it. In some cases, you might even remember the word wrong. You recall someone saying resolvent when they meant solution. You're sure they said it, but when you bring it up later, they have no memory of saying it. You start to doubt your hearing, but you still remember the word. You can picture how it felt, how it landed in the sentence. Whether they said it or not, your brain kept it. These moments aren't limited to casual speech. You might read a word in a novel that you assume is real. It fits, it flows. You never stop to look it up. Months later, you use it in writing. Spell check flags it, you double check, it doesn't exist. You reread the book, you find the word, it was invented by the author, but your mind absorbed it like a fact. Other times, someone speaks fast and two words blend together. Instead of basically reasonable, you hear basinable. You accept it. You think maybe it means simple and solid. You don't realize it was just a slip. two words tangled by speed, but the result sounded right. And that's enough to fool your ears. Your brain is tuned to find meaning in noise. If someone said, "The meeting was reclouded after lunch," you'd understand. You'd assume it means confused or messy or uncertain again. You might even use it later. Let's not recloud the issue. It's not real, but it feels like it is. That's the glitch. The effect grows when multiple people use the same glitch. Someone says grumblement in a joke, meaning a shared complaint or frustration. Others pick it up. It spreads through a conversation. No one questions it. You write it down later and realize it doesn't exist. But for an hour, it lived as a real word. You don't always remember these words. They disappear after a few days. But sometimes one sticks. You hear it once and keep it. You start to wonder how many other words you've accepted without checking, how many made-up sounds your brain shaped into meaning. You realize that the boundary between real and not real in language is thinner than it seems. One slip, one sound, and suddenly, the world speaks a word that shouldn't exist, but makes perfect sense anyway. You pull into your driveway. The engine clicks as it cools. You sit for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. Something feels off. You check the time. You left work 40 minutes ago. That matches your usual commute. But you can't remember a single part of the drive. Not the red lights, not the turns, not the highway exit. It's blank. You try to replay it, starting the car, pulling out of the parking lot. But after that, everything fades. You remember getting into the car, and now you're here. That's it. It doesn't feel like sleep. You didn't drift off. You didn't lose control. You were driving. You made it home safely. But there's no memory of the process, no scenes, no images, no sounds. You remember leaving. You remember arriving. The in-between is gone. This kind of experience is called a missing time event. It's more common than most people admit. It usually happens during routine tasks, commutes, chores, walks, showers. You do something that you've done many times before. Your body follows the pattern. Your brain disengages. You move through space, but later you realize you didn't register the details. It's not the same as daydreaming. It's not the same as zoning out. It's a total blank. You were present, but now the time feels like it disappeared. Sometimes it's short. You're brushing your teeth and suddenly you're done. You don't remember switching sides. You don't remember rinsing. You stare at the sink and think, did I brush at all? You check your toothbrush. It's wet. The paste is gone. You did the task, but your mind didn't keep the record. Other times it's longer. You're on a train scrolling through your phone. Then you look up and realize 3 stops passed. You weren't asleep. You weren't distracted, but you have no memory of the time. You check your texts. You didn't send any. You check your call log. Nothing. Just silence, movement, and now this strange gap. It's not frightening at first. It's just unsettling. You know you were awake. You know you didn't lose consciousness. You didn't faint. You didn't black out. But your brain didn't save the time. It deleted it like a file that never finished downloading. Some people notice it while walking. You leave your house to run an errand. You remember locking the door. Then you're suddenly in the store, looking at items on a shelf. You check the clock. 20 minutes passed. You try to recall the route, the crosswalks, the people, but nothing comes. You don't feel dizzy or tired. You're alert, but the walk is gone. This isn't the same as being distracted. Distraction is when you're focused on something else, music, a podcast, a thought. You miss a turn, you forget what someone said, but you were there. You just weren't paying attention. Missing time is different. There was no thought, no soundtrack, just a gap. A stretch of time where your memory didn't form. Experts say this happens when the brain switches to autopilot. You perform a task so often that it becomes automatic. Your body knows what to do. Your brain doesn't need to engage with each step, so it checks out. It focuses on something else, or nothing at all. When the task ends, it checks back in. But the time in between isn't saved. It's like walking through fog. You arrived on the other side, but you can't see the path you took. It's most common during routines. Tasks you've done hundreds of times, driving the same road, folding the same clothes, standing in the same shower. You don't need to think. Your body does the work. But when the pattern is broken, when you get home and can't remember the road, it creates a jolt. You feel like you lost something. A block of time slipped away. Sometimes it happens with conversations. You're talking to someone. You hear their voice, you nod along, then suddenly you realize you missed part of what they said. You weren't thinking of anything else, you just weren't there. They ask you a question, you hesitate, you have no idea what the last sentence was. You can't replay it, you never heard it, but you were standing there the whole time. People try to explain it away. They say they must have been tired, or hungry, or distracted. But that doesn't explain the absence. You weren't thinking of something else, you were just gone, briefly, without knowing you left. In rare cases, people report losing hours. They leave home intending to run a quick errand. Then they look at the clock and realize it's dark. 2, 3, 4 hours passed. They don't remember where they were. They check their pockets. No receipts, no new messages. They try to reconstruct the day. They can't. They might drive around looking for familiar places, retrace the route. Sometimes a flash comes back, a parking lot, a cashier's voice, a hallway. But other times, there's nothing. Just a wide, quiet blank. They didn't sleep, they didn't wander aimlessly. They just don't remember what happened. Most missing time events aren't hours long. They're minutes, maybe a half hour. But they leave the same feeling, a tug at the edge of memory, a pause in the middle of normal life. You want to explain it, you want to write it off, but part of you keeps wondering, where did I go during that time? You watch others, trying to see if it happens to them. Someone at a bus stop stares forward, eyes blank. Then they blink and check their watch. You wonder if they just came back from somewhere. Some blank space between minutes. You start to test yourself. You drive the same route home. You count the turns. You name the streets. You watch for signs. You try to keep the memory. Sometimes it works. Other times you still arrive home, key in the lock, with no memory of the road behind you. You look at the gas gauge, the mileage, the time on your phone. You know you made the trip. You just didn't bring back the memory. And once it happens, you notice it more. You walk into a room and forget what you came for. That's normal. But now you notice the time it took. Did you cross the room? Did you pause in the hallway? Did your feet stop? Did your mind skip a frame? It's not sleep, it's not distraction, it's not denial, it's just missing. The time passed, the world kept moving, and you arrived intact. But the road behind you is gone, like it was never walked at all.